Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today I have a bunch of new stories for you. Let's start right away with the first one. It is titled, "My wife, the CEO, announced, I want a prenup. I'm not risking my future on you." I nodded, smart thinking. Then I had my lawyer draft one that protected everything I'd built. Her lawyers called when they realized I had 10 times more assets than she did. So there I was, Marcus Hale, 34 years old and supposedly living the dream, sitting across from my fiancée, Cassandra, at some bougie rooftop restaurant that charged $23 for what they called artisan bread. But what I recognized is literally just toast with butter and some fancy salt sprinkled on top. The kind of place where the waiters wear vests that cost more than my monthly car payment. And they describe every dish like it's a Netflix documentary. You know, the type where ordering a steak requires a PhD in culinary pretentiousness. And asking for ketchup gets you looks like you just announced you're voting for the other guy. The view was admittedly gorgeous. I'll give them that. The city lights sparkled below us like someone had dumped a jewelry box across the skyline. And there was this violinist wandering between tables playing something classical that I'm sure was culturally significant, but honestly just sounded like fancy background music for rich people to ignore while they Instagrammed their truffle fries. Cassandra had picked this place naturally because she picked everything these days. Where we ate, where we vacationed, which shade of beige our future kitchen cabinets would be, all her calls, all the time. She looked absolutely stunning that night. Don't get me wrong. Her dark hair was pulled back in one of those effortlessly elegant styles that probably took 45 minutes and 3 YouTube tutorials to achieve. And she wore this emerald green dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe combined. The candlelight was doing that thing where it made her skin glow like she was lit by a professional cinematographer. And I remember thinking, yeah, okay, universe. I get it. She's gorgeous. Point taken. I'd assumed we were there to celebrate. Her tech company had just gone public. IPO day, baby. And the stock had opened strong enough to make her personal shares worth something in the holy crap range of numbers. She'd been riding high all week, texting me screenshots of financial news articles with her company's name in bold, forwarding me congratulatory emails from investors and venture capitalists. Basically doing everything except hiring a sky rider to announce her success. Not that I blamed her, really. She'd worked her tail off for this, pulling 80-hour weeks, living on cold brew coffee, and whatever counted as food in Silicon Valley these days. She'd earned her moment. So, when she reached across the table and took my hand with that smile, the one that usually preceded either really good news or really expensive purchases, I figured she was about to suggest we upgrade the honeymoon from Cabo to the Maldives, or maybe finally pull the trigger on that Tesla she'd been eyeing. I was mentally preparing my yes, dear face, maybe planning how I'd pretend to be excited about spending 2 weeks at a resort where the Wi-Fi was probably garbage. Instead, Cassandra squeezed my fingers. Looked me dead in the eyes with the kind of serious expression usually reserved for cancer diagnosis or reveal that someone's been eating your leftover Chinese food and said, "Marcus, I want a prenup. I'm not risking my future on you. I'm not even kidding." I literally almost choked on the breadstick I'd been chewing. Like full-on sitcom-style choking. The kind where you're coughing and your eyes are watering and you're trying not to spray crumbs across the table like some kind of carb-loaded sprinkler system. The couple at the next table glanced over with that mix of concern and judgment that people reserve for public displays of mortality. I grabbed my water glass and took a gulp, buying myself maybe 10 seconds to process what had just come out of my fiancée's mouth. A prenup. She wanted a prenuptial agreement at our celebratory dinner with the violinist literally standing 6 feet away playing something that was probably supposed to be romantic but now felt like the soundtrack to a murder mystery. Now, here's the thing. I wasn't mad. I really wasn't. In fact, part of me wanted to laugh, which probably sounds insane, but stick with me here. See, Cassandra thought she was being the smart one, the practical one, the financially savvy tech executive protecting her newly minted fortune from her humble software consultant boyfriend who fixed bugs for startups and drove a beat-up SUV that made concerning noises whenever I turned left. She thought she was making a bold, independent woman move, the kind her business school professors would have applauded. What she didn't know, what nobody knew except my lawyer and my accountant and possibly my mother, though she might have forgotten because she also forgets my birthday half the time, was that I was worth significantly more than her. Like significantly, but we'll get to that later. I set down my water glass, wiped my mouth with the fancy cloth napkin that was probably going to be laundered by hand in blessed mountain spring water or whatever, and smiled at her. Not a fake smile, either. A genuine amused "oh honey, you have no idea what's about to happen" kind of smile. Smart thinking, I said, keeping my tone light and agreeable like she just suggested we get appetizers. Really, Cass? That's actually brilliant. Protecting your assets, thinking long term, being practical about the business side of marriage. Very mature. She blinked at me like I just complimented her on correctly identifying what color the sky was. Confusion flickered across her face for maybe half a second. I guess she'd expected pushback, maybe some wounded pride, or at least a request to discuss it later when there wasn't a violinist hovering nearby like a tuxedoed ghost. But I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. Instead, I raised my wine glass, a pen noir that the sommelier had recommended with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts, and offered a toast to protecting assets. We clearly don't have the same amount of, I said cheerfully, clinking my glass against hers before she could fully process the implications of that statement. She laughed, but it was that uncertain laugh people do when they're not entirely sure if something's funny or if they're missing the joke. Spoiler alert, she was absolutely missing the joke. The joke was flying over her head at approximately Mach 3, trailing smoke and doing loop-loops while she sat there thinking she'd just pulled off some big power move. The rest of dinner was surreal. Cassandra launched into this detailed explanation about how her legal team, because of course she already had a legal team assembled, like she was planning a corporate merger instead of a marriage, had drafted a preliminary agreement. She used phrases like spousal financial limitations and asset protection protocols and liability containment. Basically turning our upcoming marriage into something that sounded like a business acquisition with slightly better catering. I nodded along, making appropriate sounds while mentally composing a text message to my own lawyer, Gina Rowe, who I'd been working with for years and who had the kind of sharp legal mind that could find loopholes in the 10 Commandments. Gina was going to absolutely lose her mind when I told her about this. She'd been waiting for Cassandra to show her true colors for months now, dropping hints like, "Your girlfriend seems very interested in your financial planning, and has she asked to see your tax returns yet?" The moment we left the restaurant, after Cassandra insisted on paying with her company credit card, naturally making a big show of it like she was establishing dominance through overprick base, I pulled out my phone. My fingers flew across the screen. Cash just asked for a prenup. Game on. Gina's response came back before I'd even made it to my car. Finally. Been waiting for this one. My office tomorrow 9 a.m. Bring coffee and your sense of humor. We're going to need both. I sat in my beat-up SUV in the restaurant parking lot. The valet had given it a look like I'd asked him to park a diseased llama and just smiled. Cassandra's Tesla was already pulling out onto the street, her tail lights disappearing into downtown traffic, probably heading back to her penthouse to call her friends and brag about how she'd handled the prenup conversation like a boss babe. The game had begun. All right. She'd just started a chess match without realizing I'd been playing three-dimensional chess the entire time. But hey, I'd let her enjoy her victory lap for now. After all, the best plot twists come when people think they've already figured out the ending. I started my SUV. It made that concerning grinding noise again. Really needed to get that checked and headed home to my modest little condo with my modest little life. Already planning my next move. Tomorrow morning, Gina and I were going to draft a prenup of our own. Only ours was going to have some very interesting clauses that I had a feeling Cassandra wasn't going to see coming. This was going to be fun. Here's the thing about perception versus reality. Most people only see what you want them to see, and I'd become a freaking Jedi master at controlling that narrative. To everyone in my life, including Cassandra and her entire circle of power-suited, kombucha drinking, TED Talk watching friends, I was just Marcus Hale, the reliable but ultimately unremarkable software consultant who fixed code for startups and lived a comfortable but decidedly average existence. You know, the type. Shows up to work in jeans and a hoodie, orders the same turkey club for lunch 3 times a week, drives a vehicle that's held together by duct tape and prayer. The kind of guy who blends into the background at parties while more interesting people talk about their vacations to Croatia. They saw a guy who made decent money. Sure, enough to split fancy dinners and contribute to a wedding fund without crying into his bank statement, but nothing spectacular. Nothing that would make anyone sit up and take notice or suddenly develop opinions about how I should invest or what I should be driving or whether I'd consider diversifying my portfolio. I was financially comfortable in the most boring middle-class way possible, like a human equivalent of a Toyota Camry. Reliable, functional, completely forgettable. What Cassandra didn't know, what literally nobody except my lawyer, Gina, my accountant, Harold, and probably the IRS knew, was that 3 years ago, I'd quietly sold a piece of software that I'd built in my spare time for $18.6 million. And yeah, you read that right, $18.60, $6 million plus royalties that kept rolling in every quarter like clockwork, adding a nice little bonus to my bank account that would make most people's annual salary look like tip money. The software was a cloud-based AI system for logistics management. Basically a really smart tool that helped companies figure out the most efficient ways to move products from point A to point B while saving money and reducing their carbon footprint and making their supply chain managers look like geniuses. I'd started building it about 6 years ago when I was working for a mid-sized tech company and got frustrated with how clunky and outdated all the existing logistics software was. It was like watching someone try to run a marathon in wooden clogs. Technically possible, but painfully inefficient and just sad to witness. So, I did what any self-respecting engineer with too much time and too much coffee does. I built something better. Nights, weekends, lunch breaks, those weird hours between 2 and 5 a.m. when you can't sleep and your brain decides it's the perfect time to solve complex algorithmic problems. I coded and tested and refined, living off energy drinks and the kind of takeout food that arrives in styrofoam containers with mysterious sauces. My friends thought I was going through some kind of quarter-life crisis. My mom thought I needed a girlfriend. Nobody realized I was building something that would eventually change my life completely. The beauty of the system was that it was genuinely useful. Within 6 months of soft launching it, half the startups in the city were using it. Within a year, I had clients in 15 states. Within 18 months, a major investment firm came knocking with an offer that made my hands shake when I read the number. They wanted to buy it outright, integrate it into their portfolio of business solutions, and pay me not just a massive lump sum, but also ongoing royalties based on usage and licensing. I remember sitting in that conference room with their acquisition team, all of them in suits that cost more than my rent, and thinking, holy hell, this is actually happening. My lawyer, Gino, was there, of course, negotiating terms like a boss and making sure I didn't accidentally sign away my firstborn or agree to anything stupid. When we finally shook hands and signed the paperwork, I walked out of that building a legitimately wealthy man. Not I can afford a nicer apartment, wealthy, but I could retire tomorrow and live comfortably for the rest of my life. Wealthy. And then I did something that apparently nobody does when they suddenly come into money. I kept my mouth shut and my lifestyle exactly the same. I didn't buy a Porsche or a pin house or start wearing watches that cost more than college tuition. I didn't suddenly develop a taste for caviar or feel the need to vacation in places where you need a passport and a translator. I stayed in my modest 2-bedroom condo in a perfectly average neighborhood where the biggest drama was usually someone leaving their garbage cans out too long. I kept driving my beat-up SUV that made alarming noises and had a mysterious stain on the back seat that I'd stopped trying to identify. I still bought my coffee at the regular coffee shop instead of the pretentious one with the foam art. And I still wore the same jeans and t-shirts I'd been wearing since college because honestly, why the hell not? Here's what I'd learned from watching other people come into money. The moment everyone knows you have it, your life becomes exponentially more complicated. Suddenly, you've got long-lost cousins remembering your birthday, friends with amazing investment opportunities that sound suspiciously like pyramid schemes and romantic partners who are suddenly very interested in discussing your financial future together. Money doesn't just change your bank account. It changes how everyone around you behaves, and not usually in good ways. The last time someone had found out I had any significant amount of money, this was years ago before the big sale, when I'd made a decent bonus from a consulting gig, they'd suddenly become allergic to splitting the bill. Every dinner became this awkward dance of, oh no, you get this one, followed by them never ever reaching for their wallet again. They'd gotten weird about it, entitled almost like my slightly larger bank balance meant I was now the designated patron saint of picking up tabs. It was exhausting and irritating and it killed the friendship faster than you could say Venmo request. So when the big money came through, I made a conscious decision to keep living like regular Marcus, the forgettable software guy who was doing okay, but nothing spectacular. I took on occasional consulting gigs to maintain the appearance of needing to work. Showed up to meetings with my old laptop that had stickers from conferences nobody remembered and generally played the part of a guy who was comfortable but not wealthy. And it worked beautifully. Cassandra absolutely loved being the successful one in our relationship. It fed something in her ego that I didn't fully understand but was happy to accommodate because honestly it made my life easier. She paid for the fancy dinners and bragged to her friends about her hotshot career and treated me like her charming but financially inferior partner. The guy who was successful enough to not be embarrassing but not so successful that he threatened her position as the alpha earner. I was her safe, supportive, slightly beneath her boyfriend. And she wore that dynamic like a designer handbag. I let her have it. Why? Because watching someone underestimate you is actually kind of hilarious. And also because I genuinely didn't need the spotlight. Let her have her moment. Let her feel like the boss. I was perfectly content being underestimated, living my quiet life, making my quiet money, and not having to deal with the circus that comes with everyone knowing your net worth. But then her prenup arrived in my inbox, forwarded from her lawyer's office with a subject line that read, premarital agreement. Review and response requested. I opened it during my lunch break, sitting at my desk with a sandwich that I'd made at home, because spending $12 on lunch seemed wasteful, even with millions in the bank, and started reading through the clauses. No alimony, return the engagement ring if the marriage dissolves within 5 years. Spousal financial limits on joint accounts, separate property designations, liability waivers. It read less like a marriage agreement and more like a corporate contract designed to protect a company from a hostile takeover. Every clause basically screamed, I have money and you don't, so let's make sure you can't touch mine. I laughed so hard that coffee came out my nose, legitimately shot out like a caffeinated geyser, spraying across my keyboard, and making my coworker in the next cubicle ask if I was okay. I was more than okay. I was delighted. This was the most entertainment I'd had in months. I forwarded the entire document to Gina with a simple message. She really did it. Thoughts? Her response came back within minutes and I could practically hear her cackling through the phone. Oh, sweetheart, this is Christmas morning. We're drafting 1, 2. Only hours will have fireworks, confetti, and a surprise ending that'll make her lawyer need therapy. Clear your schedule for tomorrow. We've got work to do. I sat back in my office chair, grinning like an idiot, watching my coworkers mill around, discussing their mundane problems, printer jams, meeting conflicts, whether the office therm was set too cold. None of them had any idea that the quiet guy in the corner cubicle was about to flip his entire relationship dynamic on its head. The game wasn't just beginning anymore. The pieces were in position, and Cassandra had just made the opening move in a chess match. She didn't realize she was already losing. Cassandra showed up at my condo that evening unannounced, which was pretty typical for her these days since she'd started treating my place like an extension of her own personal empire. I heard her heels clicking up the hallway before she even knocked. These sharp staccato sounds that announced her presence like a corporate drummer leading a parade of ambition and designer handbags. She had a key, of course, but she always knocked first, which I'd initially thought was respectful until I realized it was actually her way of giving me a 3-second warning to look appropriately grateful for her arrival. I opened the door to find her standing there in full boardroom regalia, despite it being 7:30 on a Wednesday night. She was wearing this tailored navy pantsuit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. Her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail that must have required industrial strength product to achieve that level of perfection. And she was absolutely radiating the kind of confidence that comes from spending your day telling people what to do and having them actually do it. She also smelled incredible, some perfume that I'm pretty sure cost more than my car's current Blue Book value. Something with notes of jasmine and financial superiority. She kissed me on the cheek, a gesture that felt more like a queen acknowledging a loyal subject than a fiancé greeting her future husband, and breezed past me into my living room like she owned the place, which given the prenup she was proposing, she wanted to make very clear she didn't and never would. Marcus, she said, settling onto my couch with the kind of graceful efficiency that made everything look choreographed. I'm really glad you're being so mature about the prenup situation. A lot of men would have gotten defensive or emotional, but you're handling it with such grace. It's very attractive. Honestly, shows real emotional intelligence. I nodded along, playing my role perfectly. The understanding boyfriend who knew his place in the financial hierarchy. Well, you know me, I said, keeping my tone light and agreeable. I'm all about practical solutions and thinking long term. Marriage is a partnership, and partnerships need clear agreements. She smiled, genuinely smiled like I just passed some kind of test she'd been administering without telling me. Exactly. That's exactly what I told my team. I said, Marcus gets it. He understands that this is just good business sense. You're not like other guys who get all weird about money and pride and masculinity. I sat down in the armchair across from her, the one with the slightly worn cushion that I'd been meaning to replace for about 2 years, but kept forgetting about because honestly, it was comfortable and I didn't care that it didn't match the rest of my furniture. Actually, I said, letting the word hang in the air for just a moment. I thought it was such a good idea that I asked my lawyer to prepare 1, 2. The change in her expression was subtle, but absolutely priceless. Her smile froze, not disappeared, just froze like someone had hit pause on a video right in the middle of an animation. Her perfectly groomed eyebrows, which probably required monthly maintenance appointments and specialized tools, drew together slightly in confusion. Wait, she said slowly, processing this information like a computer trying to run software it wasn't equipped for. You have a lawyer? Yeah, I said casually like I was mentioning that I had a dentist or a guy who fixed my plumbing when it got weird. Gina Rowe, I've been working with her for a few years now. She handles all my contract stuff, legal questions, boring paperwork things. She's fantastic, cheaper than therapy, and twice as fun to talk to. Cassandra laughed, But it was one of those laughs that people do when they're not entirely sure what's happening, but they want to seem like they're in on the joke. It came out a little forced, a little artificial, like artificial sweetener trying to pass as sugar. "That's great," she said. And I could practically see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out why a simple software consultant would need a lawyer on retainer for contract stuff. "So, you're drafting your own prenup, too?" "Well, Gina is," I clarified, being helpful. "I'm not exactly fluent in legal jargon. I mostly just tell her what I want and she translates it into the kind of language that makes sense in court. She's really good at it. Went to Columbia Law, clerked for a federal judge, worked at one of those big Manhattan firms before deciding she preferred working with actual humans instead of corporate robots. We got connected through a mutual friend a few years back, and she's been invaluable ever since." I could see Cassandra trying to process this information, trying to fit it into her existing mental model of who I was and what my life looked like. In her mind, I was supposed to be the guy who maybe asked a buddy who knew a buddy who was in law school for advice, not someone who had an actual established attorney relationship with a Columbia-educated lawyer who'd worked at prestigious firms. It didn't compute with her narrative. "That's very thorough of you," she finally said, recovering her composure with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent years in boardrooms where showing confusion was basically admitting weakness. "I mean, I'm sure your prenup will be fairly straightforward, just covering the basics." "Oh, I'm sure." I agreed cheerfully. Gina is very thorough, though. She likes to make sure all the bases are covered, every detail accounted for. She actually got pretty excited when I told her about your prenup. Said something about how it was going to be fun to draft proper counterproposals. I think she likes the challenge, like a puzzle or a chess game. Cassandra's smile was getting tighter now, less genuine, more of a professional mask she was maintaining out of habit. "Well, I'm sure our lawyers will work well together. Dalton, that's my attorney, is very experienced with these matters. He handles prenups for half the tech executives in the city." "That's perfect. Then," I said, "all sunshine and cooperation." Gina loves working with experienced attorneys. She says it makes everything go faster when everyone knows what they're doing. She mentioned we should probably do a full financial disclosure on both sides just to make sure everything's transparent and above board. Standard procedure, apparently. That word disclosure hung in the air between us like a smoke alarm that had just started beeping. I watched Cassandra's face carefully, saw the tiniest flicker of something that might have been concern or maybe just curiosity. She thought she knew everything about my financial situation because I'd been so carefully average in her presence, so consistently unimpressive in my displays of wealth. The idea that there might be something to disclose beyond software consultant makes decent salary probably seemed absurd to her. "Of course," she said smoothly, already pulling out her phone, probably to text Dalton about this unexpected development. "Transparency is important, although I imagine your disclosure will be pretty straightforward. Salary, savings, maybe a 401k. Dalton can have his paralegal whip up the standard forms." "Probably." I agreed. Not correcting her adorable misconceptions. Gina said she'd have everything ready by next week. She's very efficient. I think you'll like her actually. She's got that same kind of direct, non-nonsense energy you have. Very professional, very sharp. Cassandra stayed for another 40 minutes during which she talked about her company's stock performance, an upcoming board meeting, and some corporate drama involving a VP who'd made the mistake of questioning her strategy in front of investors. I made the appropriate listening noises, asked the right questions, played the supportive partner role perfectly. The whole time though, I was mentally counting down the hours until my meeting with Gina tomorrow morning where we were going to craft a prenup that would make Cassandra's fancy lawyer earn whatever astronomical hourly rate he was charging. After she left, another cheek kiss, another cloud of expensive perfume, another reminder that she had an early meeting tomorrow, so she couldn't stay over. I immediately texted Gina. She has no idea. This is going to be spectacular. Her response was almost instantaneous. Already drafting, bringing my A game. We're adding full financial disclosure requirements, asset verification protocols, and a few fun clauses about good faith negotiations. If Madam CEO wants to play lawyer ball, we're bringing the entire legal league. Also, I'm putting in a clause about honesty in relationships just for the irony. I grinned at my phone like an idiot. "Make it sparkle," I typed back. "Oh, honey," she replied. "I'm about to make it shine like a disco ball at a billionaire's wedding. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we're going to create a legal document so beautiful it should be in a museum. Also, bring good coffee. The stuff in my office tastes like filtered sadness." I spent the rest of the evening in a genuinely good mood, ordering pizza from my regular place. The one with the slightly greasy boxes and the guy at the counter who always gave me extra garlic knots and watching basketball highlights while my cat, Chairman Meow, yes, I named my cat Chairman Meow, Sumi judged me from his perch on the bookshelf. Cassandra thought she was playing chess, making strategic moves, protecting her assets like a good CEO. What she didn't realize was that she just walked into a game where she didn't even know all the pieces on the board. Tomorrow morning, Gina and I were going to change that. We were going to put all the pieces in plain view, spread them out on the table, and watch what happened when Cassandra realized that her slightly dorky, financially unremarkable fiancé was actually playing a completely different game than she thought. I couldn't wait. The law office was located in one of those downtown buildings that screamed. We charge by the minute and our coffee is imported. All glass and chrome and architectural angles that looked like someone had given MC Cher a blank check and told him to go crazy. The lobby had that polished marble floor that made your footsteps echo importantly, like every step you took was being documented for posterity or at least for someone's Instagram story about power moves and professional success. The whole place smelled like expensive wood polish, fresh leather, and the kind of quiet money that doesn't need to announce itself because everyone already knows it's there. Gina had suggested we meet at Dalton's office as a courtesy, which I thought was hilarious because there was nothing courteous about what we were about to do. It was like a boxer suggesting you choose which ring you want to get knocked out in. Technically polite, ultimately irrelevant. She'd shown up at my place that morning in a sharp black suit that meant business. Carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it could survive a nuclear apocalypse and still have room for highlighters. And she'd been grinning like someone who'd just been told Christmas was coming early this year. Ready to ruin someone's whole narrative? She'd asked cheerfully while I locked my apartment door. Born ready, I'd replied, and I meant it. We arrived exactly on time. Gina was big on punctuality as a power move. Said it showed you respected everyone's time while also establishing that you were organized and professional, and were ushered into a conference room that looked like it had been designed specifically to intimidate people into settling. The table was this massive slab of dark wood that probably cost more than a decent used car, surrounded by leather chairs that made important creaking noises when you sat in them. And one entire wall was floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city that basically screamed, "Look how successful everyone in this room is." Cassandra was already there. Of course, because she'd probably arrived 15 minutes early to establish territorial dominance. She was wearing a white power suit that was so crisp and bright it could probably be seen from space. Paired with these killer heels that added 3 into her height and about 50 points to her intimidation factor. Her hair was pulled back in a style that said, "I woke up like this," but actually meant, "I woke up 2 hours early to look like this." And her makeup was flawless in that way that takes significant time and skill to achieve while appearing natural. She looked like she'd stepped out of a Fortune 500 cover shoot, which was probably the exact vibe she was going for. Her lawyer, Mr. Dalton, sat beside her, looking equally polished and approximately 3 times as smug. He was one of those silver-haired attorney types who probably played golf with judges on weekends and owned multiple vacation homes that he referred to as the place in Aspen or the Cape House. Like everyone just automatically knew which Cape he meant. His suit probably cost what I used to make in a month back in my actual struggling software consultant days. And he wore a watch that looked like it could fund a small nation's GDP. He had that expression that expensive lawyers get when they think they've already won. This sort of benevolent condescension, like a cat that's already caught the mouse and is just playing with it for entertainment value. "Marcus," Cassandra said warmly, standing to kiss my cheek in that performance of affection that I'd grown accustomed to. "Thank you for being so reasonable about all this. Mr. Dalton has prepared everything beautifully." "I'm sure he has," I said pleasantly, taking a seat across from them. Gina settled in beside me with the kind of calm confidence that made me want to high-five her. She set her briefcase on the table with a satisfying thud that said, "We're here and we mean business." Dalton cleared his throat importantly, the way people do when they're about to say something they think is significant. "Shall we begin with Ms. Reeves's financial disclosure? I think you'll find everything is quite in order." He slid a leather portfolio across the table toward us like he was presenting evidence at trial. "My client has been remarkably transparent about her assets." Gina opened the portfolio with the casual interest of someone browsing a restaurant menu, flipping through pages while I pretended to be fascinated by the view outside. The disclosure was thorough. I'll give them that. Cassandra's company shares, current valuation, her penthouse lease details, the loan on her Tesla, her investment accounts, her savings, everything laid out in neat columns with official letterheads and verification stamps. It was the financial equivalent of peacock feathers, all spread out for maximum impressive display. "Very comprehensive," Gina said approvingly, closing the portfolio. "My client appreciates the thoroughness. Mr. Dalton, you have an excellent reputation, and this work reflects that." Dalton actually pined a little, puffing up like he'd just been told his kid made honor roll. Well, we do pride ourselves on attention to detail. I've handled prenuptial agreements for some of the most prominent executives in the city, and I believe in complete transparency as the foundation of any solid marital contract. Transparency, Gina repeated, nodding thoughtfully. Yes, that's so important. Which is exactly why we've prepared Mr. Hale's disclosure with the same level of detail. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a binder. Not a slim portfolio like Cassandra's, but an actual thick binder, the kind you'd use for a doctoral thesis or a comprehensive business plan. She set it on the table between us, and I swear to God, it made an audible thud that seemed to echo in the suddenly very quiet conference room. Here are Mr. Hale's financials, Gina said pleasantly, sliding the binder across the polished wood toward Dalton and Cassandra. As you'll see, we've been quite thorough. I watched Dalton's face as he opened the binder, and it was absolutely worth the price of admission to this whole circus. His expression went from smugly confident to confused to completely frozen in the span of about 4 seconds, which might be a record for emotional whiplash in legal proceedings. His eyes scanned the first page, then widened, then scanned again like he thought he might have misread something. The color drained from his face in a way that would have been concerning if it wasn't so entertaining. Cassandra leaned over to look, her perfectly manicured hand reaching out to turn the page, and I got to watch in real time as her brain tried to process what she was seeing. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed, then opened again like a fish that had suddenly found itself on dry land and wasn't quite sure how that had happened. The confident boardroom executive expression she'd been wearing like armor just crumbled. Marcus, she said, and her voice came out weird, strangled, like she was trying to speak while someone was stepping on her throat. You're worth 8 figures. I took a sip of the water that someone had helpfully placed at each seat, probably imported from some Norwegian glacier or filtered through diamonds or something equally ridiculous, and smiled. Technically 9 if you count the royalties, I said casually, like we were discussing the weather or sports scores. They've been performing really well lately. The Q3 numbers just came in and they were pretty solid. Dalton was flipping through pages now. His silver hair practically standing on end as he encountered document after document. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds I'd forgotten I owned, the original sale agreement for my software company, royalty statements, tax returns that would make most people's eyes water. Each page was meticulously documented, verified, notarized, and completely legitimate. Gina didn't mess around when it came to paperwork. This is quite extensive, Dalton stammered. And watching a lawyer who probably charged $800 an hour struggle to form coherent sentences was honestly therapeutic. Mr. Hale, your financial position is significantly more robust than we were led to believe. Nobody led you to believe anything. I pointed out reasonably. You just assumed there's a difference. Cassandra was still staring at the binder like it was written in ancient hieroglyphics, and she was trying to decode some message from a lost civilization. Her face had gone through several color changes, from her normal healthy glow to pale to slightly flushed to a shade that I can only describe as, oh crap, I've made a terrible mistake. Her mascara, which had probably been applied with the precision of a surgeon this morning, was starting to smudge slightly at the corners where I'm pretty sure she was fighting back tears. Not sad tears, angry, frustrated, embarrassed tears. The kind you get when you realize you've completely misjudged a situation and there's an audience watching. You deceived me, she said finally. And there was an edge to her voice that could have cut glass. You've been lying this whole time about who you are, what you have. You let me think. I let you think what you wanted to think. I interrupted gently but firmly. I never lied to you, Cass. Not once. You asked me what I did for a living. I told you. Software consultant. True. You asked if I own my condo. I said yes. Also true. You never asked if I had other assets or investments or income streams. You just assumed that what you saw was all there was. Gina jumped in. Her voice professional and crisp. Mr. Hale has been completely forthcoming when asked direct questions. He simply chose not to volunteer information that wasn't requested. There's no legal or ethical violation there. In fact, I'd argue it shows remarkable restraint in an era where everyone feels compelled to broadcast their entire financial situation on social media. Dalton was regrouping now. Is lawyer brain kicking back into gear despite the shock? We may need a moment to review these documents more thoroughly, he said, trying to salvage some professional dignity. This changes the parameters of the prenuptial negotiation significantly. Take all the time you need, I said generously, standing up and buttoning my jacket. Not a fancy jacket, just my regular one from a department store that had a sale, which now felt like an extra layer of irony. We're not going anywhere. Well, actually, we're going to grab lunch, but we'll be back in an hour. There's a great taco place around the corner that does amazing carnitas. Gina, you hungry? Starving? Gina said, gathering up her things with the satisfaction of someone who'd just won the opening round of a championship match. I looked at Cassandra, who was still frozen in her chair, staring at the financial documents like they might spontaneously combust if she looked hard enough. Oh, and Cass, I said, pausing at the door. Remember what you said at dinner about not risking your future on me? I smiled, keeping my tone light and friendly. Yeah, I feel the same way. See you in an hour. We walked out of that conference room into the marble lobby. And the moment the elevator doors closed, Gina burst out laughing. Deep, genuine belly laughs that had her leaning against the elevator wall for support. Did you see her face? She gasped between laughs. Did you see Dalton's face? I thought he was going to have a cardiac event right there in his own conference room. I grinned. Worth every penny of your hourly rate. Honey, she said, wiping tears from her eyes. This one's on the house. That was pure entertainment. That night, my phone started blowing up around 8 p.m., which was honestly later than I'd expected. I figured Cassandra would start the text assault the moment she got back to her penthouse, probably around 6:30, but apparently it took her a solid 90 minutes to work herself up into the kind of rage that demanded immediate digital confrontation. I was sitting on my couch in sweatpants and an old college t-shirt that had more holes than Swiss cheese, eating leftover Chinese food straight from the container like a functional adult when my phone started vibrating so aggressively it nearly fell off the coffee table. The first text simply said, "Call me now." All caps on that now. Which in text message language is basically the equivalent of someone kicking down your door and demanding attention. I took another bite of cold lane, chewed thoughtfully, and decided that I was comfortable right where I was. Thank you very much. Chairman Meow was purring on the other end of the couch, completely unbothered by human drama, living his best life, and I figured I should take notes from his zen approach to conflict. The second text came 30 seconds later. Marcus, we need to talk about what happened today. I wiped my hands on a napkin, not because I was going to respond, just because General So Sauce on phone screens is a pain to clean, and watched as the three little dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. She was typing, deleting, retyping, probably going through 17 different versions of whatever she wanted to say, trying to find the right combination of words that would make this situation make sense to her. The third text arrived, and it was a doozy. You deceived me. I couldn't help it. I actually laughed out loud, startling Chairman Meow, who gave me a reproachful look that cats have perfected over thousands of years of judging humanity. My fingers moved across the keyboard with the kind of calm that comes from knowing you're absolutely completely in the right. You said you wanted transparency. I just turned on the lights. I could practically feel the rage radiating through the phone screen from wherever she was. The response came back fast and furious. You know that's not what I meant. You made me look like a fool. How? I typed back. GG, genuinely curious about her logic here. By having money? By being successful? By not broadcasting my net worth on the first date? Please explain which part of having my life together makes you look foolish. The typing dots appeared and disappeared for a solid 2 minutes. I finished my lo mein, cracked open a beer. Nothing fancy, just regular domestic beer that came in a 6-pack from the grocery store, and waited. This was actually kind of entertaining in a train wreck sort of way, like watching a reality show where you know exactly how it's going to end, but you can't look away. Finally, her response came through and it was long enough that it arrived in multiple texts. That thing that happens when someone is so worked up they don't realize they're writing a novel. You embarrassed me in front of my lawyer. Do you have any idea how that looked? I brought him documentation of my success, my achievements, and then you show up with some massive binder like you were planning this ambush the whole time. Dalton called me after you left and he was shocked. He said in 20 years of practice, he's never seen such a discrepancy between perceived and actual financial positions. I sat back, took a swig of beer, and considered my response options. I could be mature and sympathetic, try to see things from her perspective, maybe offer some kind of olive branch that would smooth things over. Or I could be honest, which seemed like the more entertaining and ultimately more productive option. I went with honest. Cassandra, I typed, I didn't embarrass you. You embarrassed yourself. You assumed that because I don't drive a Porsche or wear a Rolex or live in a penthouse, I must not have money. That's on you. You wanted a prenup to protect your assets from me, like I was some kind of gold digger waiting to cash in. The only thing I did was show you that maybe you should have asked a few more questions before you made assumptions. The response was almost immediate. You should have told me why. I shot back. So you could treat me differently. So you could change how you acted around me? The whole reason I don't advertise my net worth is because money makes people weird. Case in point, This conversation. 3 minutes of silence. I could imagine her in her pristine penthouse with its minimalist furniture and city views, pacing around in whatever expensive loungewear rich people wear at home. Probably drinking wine from a glass that cost more than my couch, trying to figure out how to regain the upper hand in a situation where she definitively lost it. The next text was different in tone, less angry, more accusatory. You lied by omission. That's still lying. No, I replied. Lying is saying something untrue. I never said I was broke. I never said I struggled financially. I never claimed to be anything other than what I am. You created a story in your head about who I was based on superficial observations. And now you're mad that your story was wrong. That's not my problem. That's yours. My phone actually rang then, her name flashing on the screen with a photo of her from our trip to Napa last year. Back when things were simpler and she hadn't tried to legally protect herself from my supposed financial inadequacy. I let it go to voicemail. Whatever she wanted to say could wait until she'd calmed down enough to have an actual conversation instead of just yelling accusations into the void. The voicemail notification popped up within seconds. I didn't listen to it. Instead, I sent another text. I'm not doing the phone fight thing tonight. When you're ready to have an actual adult conversation about this, let me know. Until then, I'm going to finish my Chinese food and watch the game. Her response was a single word. Unbelievable. Right back at you, I typed. And then I did something that probably would have given my mother a heart attack if she'd known. I muted the conversation and turned my attention back to the basketball game that had been playing in the background. The Celtics were up by 12 and playing some genuinely beautiful ball. And honestly, that was a lot more interesting than Cassandra's existential crisis about dating someone who turned out to have more money than she did. But she wasn't done. Oh no. Over the next 2 hours, my phone lit up with notifications that I didn't read. Couldn't read because I'd muted them, but I could see the count increasing. By the time I decided to actually check what had happened, there were 17 more messages, each one apparently more dramatic than the last based on their increasing length. I unmuted the conversation and scrolled through the saga. It was like watching someone have a full breakdown via text message, starting with anger, moving through justification, taking a detour through self-righteousness, and eventually landing at a weird place that seemed to be part accusation, part self-pity, and part demand for validation. The highlights included, I've worked hard for everything I have, which fair but irrelevant. My friends are going to ask questions now, which not my problem. Dalton said we need to completely redraft both prenups, which duh. And finally, I don't even know who you were anymore, which was particularly hilarious because I was exactly the same person I'd always been. She just finally knew my bank balance. I responded to all 17 messages with one simple text. I'm the same guy who fixed your laptop when you spilled coffee on it. Who listened to you talk about quarterly earnings for 3 hours straight, who supported your IPO dreams, and who never once made you feel bad about making more money than me, or so you thought. The only thing that's changed is your perception. Maybe sit with that for a while. Her response came 30 seconds later. This isn't over. Probably not. I agreed, but it's over for tonight. Get some sleep, Cass. You've got that board meeting tomorrow, and you're going to need to be sharp. I didn't wait for her response. I plugged my phone in across the room, a trick I'd learned from a self-help article about digital boundaries, and settled back into my couch cushions. Chairman Meow had forgiven me for the earlier disruption and was now sprawled across my lap like a furry judgmental blanket. The thing about Cassandra's meltdown was that it wasn't really about me hiding money or even about the prenup. It was about control, about narrative, about her carefully constructed image of our relationship where she was the successful one and I was the supportive but ultimately lesser partner. I disrupted that story, flipped the script without warning. And now she was scrambling to rewrite the narrative in a way that made sense to her worldview. But here's what she didn't get. What she probably would never get. I didn't care about being the richest person in the relationship. I didn't need to be the provider or the alpha earner or whatever corporate buzzword she wanted to use. I was perfectly happy being equals or letting her think she was ahead or whatever dynamic made her feel good about herself. The problem wasn't that I had money. It was that she'd wanted a prenup specifically to protect herself from me. Had basically declared that I was a financial liability she needed legal protection from and then got mad when it turned out I wasn't what she'd assumed. That's not my character flaw. That's hers. I fell asleep on the couch that night with the game still playing quietly in the background and my phone blessedly silent across the room. Tomorrow would probably bring more drama, more accusations, more attempts to make me the villain in a story where I'd literally done nothing wrong except be successful while dressing like I shopped at Target. But tonight I was just a guy with good Chinese food, a judgmental cat, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the best move in chess is the one your opponent never sees coming. The invitation to Cassandra's apartment came the next evening via text, which was interesting because she'd spent most of the day giving me the silent treatment. Or at least I assumed she had, since my phone had been blissfully quiet except for work emails and a reminder from my dentist about an upcoming cleaning. The text was formal, almost businesslike. "Can you come over tonight at 7 o'clock? We need to talk. Some of my friends will be here, too." That last sentence should have been my first red flag, maybe my second and third, too. But I was curious enough about what kind of ambush she was planning that I agreed. I showed up exactly on time because punctuality is my superpower. Wearing jeans and a button-down shirt that I'd ironed myself because I'm a functional adult who owns an iron, even if I only use it maybe 4 times a year. The building doorman knew me by now and waved me through with a knowing look that suggested he'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. I took the elevator up to the 15th floor, listening to smooth jazz that was supposed to be calming, but really just made me think about dental offices and corporate lobbies. Cassandra opened the door before I could knock, which meant she'd probably been watching the elevator camera feed like a hawk. She was wearing casual clothes. Well, her version of casual, which meant designer yoga pants that probably cost $300, and a silk blouse that looked effortless, but definitely wasn't. Her hair was down, which was unusual for her, and she wasn't wearing the full makeup armor she usually had on. For a moment, I almost felt bad about the whole situation. Almost. "Marcus," she said, and her tone was neutral, carefully controlled, like she'd been practicing in the mirror. "Thanks for coming. Everyone's in the living room." Everyone turned out to be 3 of her closest friends. The corporate wolf pack she ran with, all successful women in their 30s who wore ambition like perfume and treated brunch like a strategic planning session. There was Tina, her PR manager, a sharp-featured blonde who could spin a company scandal into a feel-good story before you finished your morning coffee. Jessica, her college roommate turned venture capitalist who evaluated people the way normal people evaluated restaurant menus, quickly and with definite opinions about value. And Rebecca, her former boss turned business partner, a woman who'd made her first million before 30 and never let anyone forget it. They were arranged in Cassandra's living room like a tribunal, sitting on her expensive minimalist furniture with glasses of wine that probably cost more per bottle than my monthly utility bill. The whole scene had the vibe of an intervention, except instead of concerned family members worried about substance abuse, it was corporate warriors concerned about what exactly their friend dating someone who turned out to have money. The logic was already breaking down. "Marcus," said Tina, and she didn't stand up or offer a handshake, just acknowledged my existence with the kind of cool assessment that PR people perfect over years of managing crisis. "We're worried. We wanted to talk to you about the situation with Cassandra." I looked at Cassandra, who was suddenly very interested in her wine glass, then back at Tina. "The situation," I repeated slowly, like I was trying out a new vocabulary word. "You mean the situation where I have money and didn't announce it on a billboard? That situation?" Jessica leaned forward, her venture capitalist brain clearly running some kind of calculation. "It's not about the money, Marcus. It's about transparency. Relationships require honesty, and you weren't honest about your financial position." I pulled out one of Cassandra's dining chairs. A sleek, uncomfortable piece of designer furniture that looked great but felt like sitting on a slightly padded board, and sat down facing them. "Okay, let's do this properly then. What specifically was I dishonest about? And I want actual examples, not vague feelings." Rebecca jumped in. Clearly the designated attack dog of the group. "You let Cassandra believe you were just a regular consultant. You drove a beat-up car, lived in a modest apartment, never mentioned having significant assets. That's deceptive by omission." "Cool," I said, nodding like I was really considering her point. "So, by that logic, should I have also told her my childhood fears, my medical history, and my browser search history on the first date? Where exactly is the line between privacy and deception?" Because from where I'm sitting, I answered every question I was asked. Honestly, I just didn't volunteer information that wasn't requested. "That's not the same thing," Tina interjected, her PR instincts kicking in. "Financial disclosure is fundamental to building a life partnership. You had to know that information was relevant." I smiled, and I could feel it wasn't a particularly nice smile. "You know what's really interesting about this conversation? 3 months ago, Cassandra told me, and I quote, 'I love that you're not intimidated by my success. So many men have fragile egos about dating a woman who makes more money.' She literally praised me for being comfortable in what she thought was a lesser financial position. So, which is it? Should I have been insecure about her making more, or should I have announced I actually made more? Because I can't win both ways." The room went quiet for a beat. Cassandra was staring at her wine like it might contain the answers to life's mysteries if she looked hard enough. Her friends exchanged glances, that silent communication thing that groups of women do when they're recalibrating their strategy mid-con conversation. The point is, Rebecca tried again, clearly not ready to give up. You made Cassandra look like a fool. She brought her lawyer financial disclosures thinking she was the primary earner and you blindsided her with your actual net worth. That's humiliating. Okay, I'm going to stop you right there, I said. And my tone was still conversational, but there was an edge to it. Now, I didn't make Cassandra look like anything. She made assumptions based on superficial observations. My car, my apartment, my clothes, and those assumptions turned out to be wrong. That's not me humiliating her. That's her humiliating herself by judging a book by its cover, and then being surprised when the book had more pages than she expected. You could have corrected those assumptions, Jessica pointed out, playing the reasonable card. Why? I asked genuinely. Why was it my job to correct her assumptions? When someone assumes I'm younger than I am or taller than I am or from a different state than I'm actually from, I don't feel obligated to immediately correct them unless it's relevant. My bank balance wasn't relevant to our relationship until she made it relevant by demanding a prenup specifically designed to protect her money from me. Tina set down her wine glass with a deliberate clink. You don't understand the pressure she's under, Marcus. She's a CEO now. She has a public image to maintain, shareholders to answer to, a reputation in the tech community, having her personal life become fodder for gossip because her fiancé turned out to be secretly wealthy. Wait, I interrupted, holding up my hand. Let me get this straight. You're mad at me because I have money, but you're framing it as concern about gossip. If I was actually broke like she thought, would there be gossip? No. If I was wealthy and flashy about it from the start, would there be gossip? Maybe, but it would be different gossip. The only reason there's any potential for gossip is because Cassandra made a very public assumption about our financial dynamic and got it wrong. That's on her. You're being deliberately obtuse, Rebecca said. And there was real anger in her voice now. You know that appearances matter in our world. You know that Cassandra's carefully built a brand around being a strong, independent, successful woman. You undermining that. I didn't undermine anything, I said, and my voice got a little louder. Despite my best efforts to stay calm, I literally supported every single thing she did. I cheered her on through her IPO. I listened to her talk about business strategy for hours. I never once made her feel small or inadequate or less successful. The only thing I didn't do was announce my net worth. And the only reason that's a problem now is because she wanted to legally protect herself from me like I was some kind of financial threat. You want to know what's really wild? I was one of the early investors in her company. My money literally helped build the foundation of her success and she had no idea. That landed like a bomb in the middle of the room. All four women froze, wine glasses suspended mid-air, faces registering shock in varying degrees. Cassandra's face went from pale to red so fast I worried about her blood pressure. What? Cassandra whispered, and her voice was barely audible. Yeah, I said, leaning back in the uncomfortable designer chair. 3 years ago, when you were looking for seed funding and nobody was biting because your pitch deck was rough and you didn't have a prototype yet, remember that anonymous investor who came through with $50,000? The one your original partner said was a friend of a friend who believed in the vision. That was me. I believed in you, Cassandra. I believed in your idea and your drive and your potential. I gave you money, my money, to help you build your dream. And I never told you because I didn't want it to change anything between us. Jessica had her phone out now, probably already looking up public investment records. Tina looked like she was mentally composing a PR statement. Rebecca just stared at me like I'd grown a second head. And Cassandra looked like she might actually cry, which would have been satisfying if it wasn't also kind of sad. So, let me ask you all a question. I continued standing up because sitting in that terrible chair was making my back hurt. If you know your friend's entire company started with money from a guy she's now trying to pin up into financial irrelevance, who exactly looks foolish in this scenario? Because from where I'm standing, it's not me. I walked to the door, done with this circus, done with being interrogated by a committee of people who apparently thought having money while dressing like a normal person was some kind of moral failing. I turned back at the doorway, looking at Cassandra directly. You know what the funny thing is, Cass? I would have signed your prenup. Any version of it. I would have agreed to protect your assets, keep finances separate, whatever made you feel secure. But you didn't want a prenup for practical reasons. You wanted one to establish dominance to make sure I knew my place in our financial hierarchy. And when it turned out there was no hierarchy, you couldn't handle it. That's not my fault. That's yours. Nobody said anything as I left. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up. The smooth jazz now sounding less like dental office music and more like the soundtrack to a relationship that was definitely over. The doorman gave me a sympathetic nod as I walked through the lobby, and I wondered how many similar scenes he'd witnessed in this building full of successful, complicated people with successful, complicated relationships. My phone buzzed before I even made it to my car. "Gina, I'm hearing rumors about tonight through the legal gossip mail. You okay? Define?" "Okay," I texted back. "Fair point. Drinks tomorrow. You can tell me everything and I'll tell you how we're going to make her lawyers cry." I smiled despite everything. Deal. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls, which seemed to be the magic number for dramatic situations in my life lately. 14 were from numbers I didn't recognize, probably reporters or nosy people who'd somehow gotten wind of the tech CEO's fiancé drama. 2 were from my actual mother asking if I was eating enough vegetables. And 1 was from a number I did recognize and had been dreading. Vivian Reeves, Cassandra's mother. The original corporate warrior princess who'd apparently given birth to a carbon copy of herself and then spent the next 30 years molding her into an even more intense version. I'd met Vivian exactly 4 times over the course of my relationship with Cassandra. And each encounter had been like having tea with a very polite, very well-dressed shark who was constantly evaluating whether you were worth eating or just ignoring. She was one of those women who'd climbed the corporate ladder in the 80s when it was basically a vertical wall with broken glass at the top. And she had the battle scars and the attitude to prove it. She wore power suits like armor, spoke in perfectly constructed sentences that sounded like they'd been edited for publication, and had a handshake that could crush walnuts. I stared at her missed call for a solid minute, debating whether answering was worth the inevitable headache. Chairman Meow, who'd been sleeping on my chest and was not pleased about being disturbed by my morning phone-checking routine, meowed his disapproval and relocated to the other end of the bed. Smart cat. He knew trouble when he smelled it. The phone rang again. Same number. Vivian Reeves was not a woman who gave up easily, which I suppose is how you become a successful corporate executive and raise another successful corporate executive. I briefly considered letting it go to voicemail again, but something told me that would only make the eventual conversation worse. Might as well rip the band-aid off now. "Hello," I answered, trying to sound like I hadn't just been debating whether to block her number. "Marcus," her voice came through the phone crisp and sharp, like she was conducting a business call rather than addressing her daughter's fiancé. "Not good morning, not how are you, just my name like an accusation. We need to talk about what you've done to my daughter." I sat up in bed, disturbing Chairman Meow further, who gave me a look that suggested our friendship was hanging by a thread. "Good morning to you too, Mrs. Reeves. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How's the weather in Connecticut?" There was a pause, the kind that happens when someone isn't used to being met with sarcasm and needs a moment to recalibrate. "This is not a social call, Marcus. Cassandra called me last night extremely upset. She told me about your financial revelation." "My financial revelation," I repeated, getting out of bed and shuffling toward the kitchen because if I was going to have this conversation, I needed coffee. "Strong coffee? Possibly intravenous coffee. You mean the part where I turned out to have money?" "Yeah, that was quite a shock for everyone. Really threw a wrench in the whole narrative." "Don't be flippant," Vivian snapped. And I could practically see her sitting in whatever pristine home office she probably had. Probably wearing a suit even though it was Saturday morning. "You humiliated my daughter in front of her legal team. You made her look foolish." I started the coffee maker, a basic Mr. Coffee that I'd owned since college and that Cassandra had repeatedly suggested I upgrade, and leaned against the counter. "Mrs. Reeves, with all due respect, I didn't make Cassandra look anything. She made assumptions about my financial situation based on superficial observations, and those assumptions turned out to be incorrect. That's not humiliation I caused. That's reality she failed to investigate. You must understand the pressure she's under." Vivian continued, and her tone shifted slightly, becoming less accusatory and more explanatory, like she was trying to make me understand something fundamental about the universe. "Cassandra has worked incredibly hard to build her company, to establish herself in a male-dominated industry, to prove that she's capable of competing at the highest levels. Image matters, Marcus. Perception matters. The story of her relationship, of being the primary breadwinner, of being strong and independent." "Let me stop you right there," I interrupted, pouring coffee into my favorite mug, the one with a cartoon cat that said, "I do what I want," that my sister had given me as a joke gift 3 Christmases ago. Are you seriously telling me that Cassandra's feminist empowerment narrative requires me to actually be less successful than her? That her story of being strong and independent only works if I'm weak and dependent? Because if that's the case, that's not empowerment. That's just a different kind of hierarchy with her on top. Another pause. I could hear her breathing controlled and measured, probably counting to 10 the way executives do when they're managing their anger in professional settings. "You're deliberately missing the point," she finally said. "No, I think I'm hitting it dead center," I replied, taking a sip of coffee that was still too hot and burned my tongue, which felt appropriate for this conversation. The point is that Cassandra wanted to be seen as the successful one in this relationship, and I let her have that because I didn't care about the spotlight. But the moment she tried to legally codify that hierarchy with a prenup designed to protect her from me like I was some kind of financial threat, she opened the door to actual financial transparency. And now she's mad that the truth doesn't match her preferred narrative. That's not my problem to fix. It becomes your problem when it affects her career. Vivon shot back. Her board is already asking questions. Investors are curious about her judgment. If she can't accurately assess her own fiancé's financial position, what does that say about her business acumen? I laughed, actually laughed out loud, which probably wasn't the diplomatic response, but was definitely the honest one. Oh, so now it's my fault that her board is questioning her judgment. Maybe they should be questioning why she demanded a prenup without doing basic due diligence on her fiancé's finances. That seems like a pretty significant oversight for someone whose whole brand is being thorough and strategic. "You should have let her feel like the provider," Vivon said. And there was something in her voice now that sounded almost desperate. "You should have understood that she needed that role, that identity. Why couldn't you just let her have it?" And there it was, the real issue, stripped of all the corporate speak and the concern about image and reputation. Cassandra's mother, the woman who built her own empire and raised her daughter to do the same, genuinely believed that Cassandra's success required someone else to be less successful, that her daughter's strength required someone else to be weak, that her achievement required someone else to be lesser. "Ma'am," I said, and I tried to keep my voice level and respectful because despite everything, I didn't actually hate Vivon. I just fundamentally disagreed with her worldview. I let Cassandra pay for dinner exactly twice in our entire relationship. Both times she insisted. Both times she made a show of it. And both times I said, "Thank you," and moved on. I never fought her on it. Never made her feel bad about it. Never tried to assert my own financial dominance. I was perfectly happy letting her feel however she wanted to feel about money. But the moment she decided my financial position was a legal liability that needed protection against, she made it relevant. You can't demand financial transparency through a legal document and then get mad when that transparency reveals information you didn't expect. "You're being unreasonable," Vivon said. But it sounded half-hearted now, like she was saying it out of obligation rather than conviction. "I'm being honest," I corrected. "There's a difference." She hung up without saying goodbye, which was probably the most honest thing either of us had done in the conversation. I stood in my kitchen in my pajama pants and old t-shirt, drinking mediocre coffee, and wondering how I'd ended up in a situation where having money and not announcing it was somehow a character flaw. My phone buzzed with a text from Gina. "Please tell me you didn't answer Vivon's call." Of course, I did. I texted back. "I live for chaos." "You're an idiot," she replied. "A wealthy idiot, but still an idiot." I'd barely finished my coffee when there was a knock at my door. Not a gentle knock, not an "I'm here to borrow sugar" and knock, but an aggressive, demanding knock that made Chairman Meow bolt from the bedroom like his tail was on fire. I looked through the peephole and saw exactly what I'd been afraid of seeing. Vivian Reeves in a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, standing next to Cassandra, who looked like she'd gotten about 3 hours of sleep and had spent most of those crying. I briefly considered pretending I wasn't home, but my car was in its designated parking spot, and they'd probably already seen it. Also, I'd already answered Vivian's call, so playing hide-and-seek now seemed pointless. I opened the door, still in my pajamas, still holding my coffee mug with the cartoon cat. Still very much not prepared for whatever intervention this was about to be. "Ladies," I said, blocking the doorway. "This is unexpected. We need to talk," Vivon said, and it wasn't a request. "May we come in?" I looked at Cassandra, who couldn't quite meet my eyes, then back at Vivon, who was staring at me with the intensity of someone conducting a hostile takeover. "Do I have a choice?" I asked. "You always have a choice, Marcus," Vivian said. "But some choices are better than others." I stepped aside and let them in. Immediately, regretting every decision that had led to this moment. They entered my modest apartment like queens, surveying conquered territory, taking in my IKEA furniture and my basic kitchen appliances, and my general aesthetic of functional adult on a budget who secretly has millions in the bank. Vivian got straight to the point, standing in my living room like she was about to deliver a keynote speech. "Marcus, appearances matter in Cassandra's world. They matter to her career, her reputation, her future success. What people think about her personal life directly impacts her professional opportunities. Surely you can understand that. I sat down in my favorite chair, the one with the worn cushion that had molded to my body over years of use. What I understand, I said slowly, is that you want me to pretend to be less successful than I am so your daughter can maintain a narrative that makes her feel powerful. And I'm saying, no, that's not, Cassandra started. But her mother held up a hand and she immediately stopped talking, which told me everything I needed to know about their relationship dynamic. Think of it as a partnership decision, Vivon continued, her tone shifting to the one she probably used in boardrooms when she was negotiating deals. For the good of Cassandra's career, for the stability of her public image, it would be beneficial if the financial disparity wasn't public knowledge. I looked at Cassandra. Is this really what you want? For me to hide who I am, what I've achieved, so you can keep pretending you're the only successful one in this relationship? She finally met my eyes. And for just a second, I saw something that might have been doubt or regret or maybe just exhaustion. But then Vivon shifted slightly and whatever I'd seen disappeared behind the corporate mask. I just want things to go back to normal, Cassandra said quietly. They can't, I replied. Because normal was based on incomplete information. This is the actual normal. The question is whether you can handle it. My neighbor from across the hall, Mr. Peterson, chose that moment to step out of his apartment for his morning jog, saw the scene through my open door, and actually clapped. Just started clapping like he'd been watching a performance and the finale had delivered. About damn time, someone told them. He called out cheerfully and then jogged off toward the stairs, leaving silence in his wake. Vivian's face was red. Cassandra looked mortified and I was sitting in my worn armchair in my pajamas, still holding my cartoon cat coffee mug, thinking that maybe Mr. Peterson had the right idea about everything. 2 days after the mother-daughter invasion of my apartment, Gina called me laughing so hard she could barely breathe. I was at my desk pretending to work on a consulting project, mostly just scrolling through basketball highlights and wondering if my relationship drama would ever end when her name flashed on my screen. You're going to absolutely love this. She gasped between laughs that sounded borderline hysterical. I just got an email from Dalton, her lawyer. You won't believe what they're proposing now. I leaned back in my chair, already grinning because anything that made Gina laugh this hard was guaranteed entertainment. Hit me with it. They want you to sign an NDA, she said, and then dissolved into more laughter about your own wealth. They want you to legally agree not to discuss your financial position publicly. I nearly dropped my phone. Wait, what? She wants me to sign a non-disclosure agreement about having money. Exactly. Gina was clearly having the time of her life to protect her image as the breadwinner. They're literally asking you to shut up about being rich so she can keep pretending she's the only successful one. We didn't make it to the wedding, which honestly surprised nobody who'd been paying attention to the dumpster fire our relationship had become. Cassandra ended things via a carefully crafted email that her PR team had obviously edited, full of phrases like incompatible life goals and divergent values that really just meant you had the audacity to be richer than me. She told everyone I'd pretended to be broke to manipulate her, which was hilarious considering I'd never once claimed to be broke. Her PR team pushed that story hard, painting me as some kind of con artist who deceived their poor, innocent CEO. The narrative spread through tech circles faster than a software bug. And for about a week, I was apparently the villain in someone else's story. Then a journalist did actual research. Crazy concept, I know, and found the public filing showing I was a major investor in Cassandra's company's early funding round. The same company she'd just taken public. The empire she'd built had literally started with my money. When that story broke, her company's stock dipped 11% in one day. Months later, life was genuinely good. My royalties kept rolling in like clockwork, padding my bank account while I continued my deliberately average lifestyle. I finally upgraded from my beat-up SUV, not because I needed to impress anyone, but because the muffler had started sounding like a dying donkey having an existential crisis, and even I have limits. Then I met Amelia at a coffee shop, an elementary school teacher who thought liquid assets meant the water fountain in her classroom. And portfolio diversification sounded like something from a sci-fi movie. Over coffee that cost $3 instead of $12, I told her the whole Cassandra saga. She laughed until tears streamed down her face. Imagine needing a legal team just to love someone, she said, wiping her eyes. I grinned. Yeah, it's a very niche form of romance. Not recommended. Looking back, Cassandra didn't break my heart. She audited it. She wanted legal protection from me, but I was the one who needed protection from her pride and her need to be superior. Now I know when someone says it's not about the money, it's always about the money. And honestly, I've never been happier signing nothing. Story 2. For 40 years, an old man lived next door. My parents hated him. Built a 10-foot fence. Sued him 3 times. He is dangerous, they said. When he died, I was the only one at his funeral. Then the lawyer handed me his will. The funeral was on a Tuesday. Gray sky, light rain, the kind of October day that feels like the world itself is mourning. I stood at the edge of the cemetery, watching 2 men I did not know lower a casket into the ground. The priest read from a book he had probably read from 1,000 times before, his words automatic, impersonal. There were no flowers except the ones the funeral home had provided as part of their basic package. No music, no eulogy, no mourners lined up to share memories of a life well lived. Just me, the priest, and the old man who had lived next door to my parents for 40 years. I did not cry. I did not know if I was supposed to. I did not know if I had earned the right. But I stayed until the end, until the last shovel of dirt covered the casket. Until the workers packed up their equipment and drove away. Until the priest shook my hand and offered condolences that felt hollow because he had never known the man he was burying. And then the lawyer appeared. He was young, maybe 30, wearing a suit that was too big for him and carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than he was. He walked across the wet grass toward me, his shoes squelching with each step. And I remember thinking that he looked nervous, like he was carrying something heavy, like he knew what he was about to do would change everything. Mr. Webb, Marcus Webb. Yes. My name is Daniel Patterson. I was Mr. Hartley's attorney. He gestured toward the fresh grave. I was hoping I would find you here. How did you know I would come? He smiled, a sad smile. He said you would. He said you were the only one who would. That was when he handed me the envelope. I should explain. My name is Marcus Webb and I am a high school history teacher in Hartford, Connecticut. 41 years old, divorced for 3 years now, no kids. I spend my days teaching sophomores about the Civil War and the Great Depression and all the other events that shaped our country. I try to make them understand that history is not just dates and names in a textbook. It is people. Ordinary people making choices that ripple forward through time affecting generations they will never meet. I never thought I would be standing in a cemetery holding an envelope from a dead man about to discover that my own history was built on a lie. That every truth I thought I knew about my family was a carefully constructed fiction designed to hide something monstrous. But I am getting ahead of myself. The old man's name was Walter Hartley. He moved into the house next door to my parents in 1984, the year I was born. For as long as I could remember, he had been there, a fixture of the neighborhood, a constant presence. His house was a small Cape Cod, white with green shutters, always neatly maintained, even as he grew older and moving became harder. His lawn was always mowed, his gutters were always clean. His car, a beige Toyota that must have been 20 years old, sat in the same spot in his driveway every single day. And for as long as I could remember, my parents had hated him. I do not use that word lightly. Hate is a strong word, a word I try to teach my students to use carefully. There is a difference between dislike and hate, between annoyance and hate, between indifference and hate. Hate is active. Hate takes energy. Hate is a fire that has to be constantly fed. My parents, Richard and Catherine Webb, fed that fire for 40 years. They never spoke to him. Not once, not a single word in 4 decades of living 15 feet apart. If they saw him in the driveway getting his mail, they would turn and go back inside. Even if they were in the middle of something. If they passed him on the street while walking the dog, they would cross to the other side. Pulling the leash so hard the dog would yelp. If he waved, they would look through him like he was made of glass. They built a 10-foot fence between the properties, the tallest the city code would allow. My father spent an entire weekend constructing it, refusing any help, driving each post into the ground with a fury I had never seen in him before. When it was done, he stood back and looked at it with satisfaction, like he had built a fortress to keep out an invading army. There, he said, now we do not have to see him. They sued him 3 times. The first lawsuit was over a tree branch that hung over the property line. The branch was maybe 2 feet into our airspace, completely harmless, but my father hired a lawyer and took Walter to court. The judge ruled in Walter's favor, calling the lawsuit frivolous, but my father appealed. He lost the appeal, too. The legal fees cost him $8,000. He did not care. It is the principle, he said. The second lawsuit was over Walter's dog, a gentle old golden retriever named Biscuit. My mother claimed the dog had threatened her, had growled and lunged at her while she was gardening. I was 12 at the time, and I knew it was a lie. I had seen Biscuit many times through gaps in the fence before it was fully reinforced. The dog was ancient, arthritic, barely able to walk, let alone lunge at anyone. But my parents pushed forward with the lawsuit anyway. The court ordered Walter to get rid of the dog. I remember watching from my bedroom window as an animal control van pulled up to his house. I remember seeing Walter come out with Biscuit in his arms, tears streaming down his face. I remember him kissing the dog's head before handing him over. I cried that night. I did not know why my parents were doing this. I just knew it was wrong. The third lawsuit was over some drainage issue that I am still not sure actually existed. My father claimed that Walter's landscaping was directing water onto our property, damaging the foundation. Engineers were hired. Reports were filed. The case dragged on for 2 years. Walter never fought back. Not really. He showed up to court dates. He paid whatever fines were ordered. He cut the tree branch. He gave away the dog. He adjusted his landscaping. And through it all, he stayed. He never moved. He never sold the house. He never retreated. Why do you hate him so much? I asked my mother once when I was maybe 10 years old. We were in the kitchen and I had been watching her glare out the window at Walter's house with an expression that frightened me. What did he do? Her face went cold. Not angry, not sad, just cold like a door slamming shut. Like someone had flipped a switch and turned off whatever warmth had been there before. He is a dangerous man, Marcus. You are never to speak to him, never to go near him, never to even look at him. Do you understand? But why? What makes him dangerous? Did he hurt someone? Some things are not for children to understand. Just trust your parents. Stay away from him. But Mom, I said stay away from him. Her voice was sharp now. Sharper than I had ever heard it. If I ever catch you talking to that man, there will be consequences. Serious consequences. Do you understand me? Yes, Mom. Good. Now go do your homework. But I did not stay away. Not completely. It started when I was 7. I was playing in the backyard, throwing a tennis ball against the fence. Bored and lonely. The way only children can be bored and lonely on a summer afternoon. My parents were inside arguing about something. They argued a lot back then. About money, about work, about whose turn it was to pick me up from school, about things I did not understand and things I understood all too well. The ball went over the fence into Mr. Hartley's yard. I stood there frozen, my heart pounding. My mother's warnings echoed in my head. Dangerous. Never go near him. Serious consequences. But I loved that ball. My grandfather had given it to me, my mother's father, the only grandparent I had ever known. He had died the year before, and that ball was one of the only things I had left of him. The other 3 grandparents were dead, or at least that is what I had been told. My father's parents had died before I was born, he said. There were no photos of them, no stories about them, nothing. I looked at the fence. It was solid wood, no gaps, no way to see through. But near the bottom, where the fence met the ground, there was a small hole, maybe 6 in across, a knot in the wood that had fallen out over time, or maybe an animal had dug there. Big enough to see through, big enough to reach through. I got on my knees in the grass, not caring about the dirt staining my jeans, and looked through the hole, and there was Mr. Hartley sitting in a lawn chair, reading a book. He was old, probably 70, with white hair that needed cutting and a weathered face that spoke of years spent outdoors. He was wearing a cardigan and slippers like someone's grandfather in a storybook. A cup of tea sat on the table beside him, steam rising in the summer air. He did not look dangerous. He looked lonely. He looked like the saddest person I had ever seen. He must have sensed me watching because he looked up. Our eyes met through the hole in the fence. I expected him to yell, to call my parents, to do something threatening. I braced myself for anger, for confrontation, for proof that my mother was right. Instead, he smiled. You lost something, he said. His voice was gentle, raspy with age. The voice of a man who had not spoken to anyone in a long time. My ball. It went over. I am sorry. Do not be sorry. These things happen. He stood up slowly, his joints creaking, and walked to where the ball had landed near his flower bed. He picked it up, examined it for a moment, then walked to the fence. He got down on his knees with a grunt of effort, and I could see his face more clearly now. Kind eyes, deep wrinkles, a face that had known sadness. He rolled the ball back through the hole. There you go, son. Thank you. You are welcome. He paused, looking at me through the hole. I should have left then. I should have taken the ball and run back inside like my mother had told me. But something kept me there. Some instinct that told me this man was not what my parents said he was. You are Marcus, right? The boy next door. Yes, sir. I am Walter. It is nice to finally meet you, Marcus. I have watched you grow up from over here. You were just a baby when I moved in. My parents say I should not talk to you. His face flickered with something. Pain maybe, or just resignation. The expression of someone who had heard those words before and had learned to accept them. I know they do, and you should listen to your parents. They only want what is best for you. Then why are you talking to me? He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with something I did not understand then, but recognize now as grief. Because you deserve kindness, Marcus. Every child deserves kindness. Even if it is just a word through a fence, I should have left. I should have reported the conversation to my parents. But I did not. Instead, I said, my grandfather gave me this ball before he died. It is special to me. Then you should take good care of it. Special things are hard to find. I will. Good. He started to get up, then paused. Marcus, if you ever want to talk, I am always here. Right on the other side of this fence. Just look through the hole and say hello. Okay. I ran back to the house, my heart pounding, the ball clutched to my chest. I did not tell my parents what had happened. I did not tell anyone, but I went back the next day. And the day after that, the hole in the fence became our secret. Every afternoon that summer, when my parents were distracted or arguing or just too wrapped up in their own lives to notice, I would sneak out to the fence. I would kneel in the grass and Walter would pull up his lawn chair on the other side and we would talk. First, we talked about small things, school, my friends, the books I was reading. He asked about my favorite subjects and I told him I liked history, that I thought it was like detective work, piecing together clues from the past to understand how we got to the present. He smiled at that. You have a curious mind, he said. That is a gift. Never lose it. He told me stories about his own life, places he had traveled when he was younger, countries I had only seen in textbooks. He had been to Italy and France and Egypt. He had seen the pyramids and the Eiffel Tower and the ruins of Pompeii. He described them in such detail that I could almost see them myself. Could almost feel the sand beneath my feet and the sun on my face. Why did you travel so much? I asked. Because I wanted to understand, he said. The world is so big, Marcus. So full of people and places and stories. I wanted to see as much of it as I could. Do you still travel? He shook his head. Not anymore. These days my world is this backyard, this chair, this fence. That sounds lonely. He looked at me with those kind sad eyes. It is, but it is a choice I made. And I would make it again. I did not understand what he meant. Not then. Sometimes he would reach through the hole and hand me things. Piece of candy. Comic book. Once a small wooden bird that he had carved himself. I used to carve all the time, he said when he gave it to me. When I was your age, my father taught me. He said it was good for the soul. Making something with your hands. It is beautiful. Keep it. Something to remember me by. I kept all of his gifts hidden in a shoe box under my bed. Terrified that my parents would find them and discover my secret. The candy I ate quickly, savoring each piece. The comic books I read by flashlight after bedtime. The wooden bird I held every night before I went to sleep, running my fingers over the smooth surface, wondering about the man who had made it. Those meetings continued for years through elementary school and middle school and the first years of high school. I would sneak out to the fence whenever I could, stealing moments with the old man my parents called dangerous. He watched me grow up through that hole in the fence. He celebrated my first day on a history test. I knew you would do well, he said. You have a natural talent for understanding the past. He consoled me when I did not make the basketball team. Not everyone is meant to be an athlete, he said. But you have other gifts. Gifts that will last longer than any game. He listened when I talked about girls I liked and friends who had betrayed me and all the small dramas of adolescence. Growing up is hard, he said. Harder than people remember, but you are handling it well, better than I did at your age. He was in many ways the only person who ever really listened to me. My parents were always distracted, always busy, always focused on their own problems, their own arguments, their own resentments. They provided for me materially, gave me food and clothes and a roof over my head. But emotionally, they were absent, cold. Walter filled that void. He gave me what my parents could not or would not give. Tension, validation, the sense that someone cared about who I was and what I thought and what I dreamed. I know now that I was starving for affection and he fed me one conversation at a time through a hole in a wooden fence. When I was 16, I got my driver's license. Suddenly, I had freedom. I could go places without my parents knowing. And the first place I went was around the block to the front of Mr. Hartley's house to knock on his door for the first time. My heart was pounding as I walked up his front steps. I had known this man for 9 years, had talked to him hundreds of times, but I had never actually set foot on his property. I had never seen the inside of his house. I had never looked at him without a fence between us. He opened the door slowly, his eyes widening when he saw me. Marcus, what are you doing here? I wanted to talk to you face to face for real. He looked past me toward my parents' house, toward the fence that separated us. Your parents would not approve. I do not care. I am 16. I can make my own decisions. He studied me for a long moment. I could see him weighing the risks, calculating the possible consequences. Then something shifted in his expression. A decision made. Come in, he said quickly. His house was small but warm. Books everywhere, stacked on every surface, overflowing from shelves that lined every wall. Novels, histories, biographies, travel guides, more books than I had ever seen in one place outside of a library. Photos on the walls showed landscapes and cityscapes from around the world. The places he had told me about. The pyramids, the Eiffel Tower, a young man standing on a mountain, arms spread wide, grinning at the camera. Is that you? I asked, pointing at the mountain photo. A long time ago, before everything changed. What changed? He did not answer. Instead, he gestured to the couch. Sit. I will make tea. The living room was cozy in a way my parents' house had never been. A fireplace with a worn armchair in front of it. A hand-knitted blanket draped over the couch. A cat I had never seen before sleeping on a windowsill. I did not know you had a cat. Her name is Shadow. She showed up a few years ago and never left. Sometimes the best family is the family that chooses you. He returned with 2 cups of tea and sat in the armchair across from me. For a moment, we just looked at each other. 2 people finally seeing each other clearly after years of fragments through a fence. It is strange, he said. Seeing you here in my home, I have imagined this moment so many times. Me too. You have grown into a fine young man, Marcus. I hope you know that. Thank you. I took a sip of tea. Earl Grey with honey. Mr. Hartley, can I ask you something? Anything? Why do my parents hate you so much? What did you do to them? The question hung in the air between us. I watched his face, looking for clues, looking for anything that might help me understand. He set down his teacup. That is a complicated question, Marcus. With a complicated answer, and I am not sure this is the right time. Please, I have been wondering for my whole life. I need to know. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with decades of regret. Some secrets are not mine to tell. Some truths would only cause pain. But I will tell you this. I have never done anything to harm your parents. Everything I have done because I love you. Love me. You barely know me. I know you better than you think. He looked at me with those sad eyes. I have watched you grow up. I have seen you struggle and succeed. I have seen the kind of person you are becoming and I am proud of you, Marcus. Prouder than you will ever know. Why? Why would you be proud of me? I am just the kid next door. He opened his mouth to say something. Then stopped. I could see him wrestling with himself, fighting some internal battle I could not understand. Someday, he said finally. Someday I will tell you everything. But not today. Today, let us just enjoy this. You here in my home. After all these years, we talked for 3 hours that day. It was different from our conversations through the fence, more open, more real. I told him about my parents, about the coldness in our house, about how I sometimes felt like a stranger in my own family. He listened without judgment. And when I was done, he said something that stayed with me for years. Family is complicated, Marcus. Sometimes the people who should love us the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But that does not mean you are unlovable. It means they are broken in ways you cannot fix. Are you broken, Mr. Hartley? His eyes went distant. In some ways, yes, we all are. But some breaks heal and some do not. What broke you? He smiled sadly. The same thing that breaks everyone eventually. Lost regret, the weight of choices made long ago. I visited him regularly after that, twice a week, sometimes more. My parents never knew. They never asked where I was going, never seemed to notice my absences. They were too wrapped up in their own lives, their own problems, their own slowly crumbling marriage. When I left for college at 18, Mr. Hartley was the only one who cried. I am so proud of you, he said, hugging me on his front porch. It was the first time he had ever hugged me. He felt frail in my arms, smaller than I expected, his bones thin beneath his cardigan. Whatever happens, remember that I will come back and visit. I know you will. And you will be here. I will always be here, Marcus. Right next door, waiting. And I did come back. Every break, every summer, I made time for him. Even as my life got busier. As I went to graduate school and got my teaching degree. As I got married to a woman named Jennifer, who never quite understood why I spent so much time with that weird old neighbor. I never forgot the man who had shown me kindness when no one else would. Jennifer and I divorced after 6 years. We wanted different things. She said we were different people. She was not wrong. I had always held part of myself back. Always kept secrets from her. Always felt like I was living a double life. The life everyone saw and the life that existed in a small house next door to my parents. When I told Walter about the divorce, he listened quietly. I am sorry, Marcus. Marriage is hard, even harder when there are things you cannot share. What do you mean? Nothing. Just an old man's observation. But something had changed over the years. In my 20s, our conversations grew shorter. He seemed tired, distracted. Sometimes he would look at me with an expression I could not read. Like he wanted to say something but could not find the words. Is everything okay? I asked once, just old age catching up with me. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Nothing to worry about. I worried anyway. In my 30s, he started declining. His memory slipped. He would repeat stories he had told me before, forget names and dates, lose track of what we were talking about mid-sentence. His mobility worsened. He stopped traveling even to the grocery store, relying on delivery services and the occasional help I could provide. I offered to help him move to find a place that could care for him properly. No, he said firmly. I am staying here. I have to stay here. Why? The house is too big for you. It is too much work. There are places with nurses, with doctors, with people who can help you. He looked at me with those sad, tired eyes, because this is where you are, Marcus. This is where I can see you. I did not understand what he meant. Not then. The last time I saw him alive was 2 weeks before the funeral. He was in the hospital, his body finally giving out after 90 years of use. I sat by his bed, holding his hand, watching his chest rise and fall. I should have told you, he whispered. His voice was barely audible over the beeping of machines. I should have told you years ago. Told me what? What should you have told me? But his eyes had closed. He slipped into sleep. And I never got my answer. Not while he was alive. Until the funeral. Until the lawyer, until the envelope. I opened it in my car, hands trembling. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray. The air still heavy with moisture. I sat in the cemetery parking lot, surrounded by headstones and silence, and I read the letter that would change everything. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper covered in handwriting. I recognized the same handwriting that had labeled birthday present slipped through the fence. The same handwriting on the notes tucked inside comic books. The same handwriting I had seen on the spines of journals in his study. Walter's handwriting to my grandson Marcus. If you are reading this, I am gone and you finally know the truth. I am sorry it took my death to tell you. I am sorry for all the years of silence. But I need you to understand why. Your father is my son. His name was not always Richard Webb. It was Richard Hartley. He was my boy, my only child, the center of my world. After his mother passed when he was just 10 years old, I raised him alone. I gave him everything I had. I loved him more than life itself. And then 45 years ago, he did something terrible. I will not tell you what it was. Not in this letter. The evidence is in my attic in a box labeled The Truth. You will find everything there. Photographs, documents, newspaper clippings, a letter in his own handwriting, everything you need to understand what happened and why. When I confronted your father about what he did, he gave me a choice. Stay silent or lose him forever. I could not stay silent. I could not pretend I did not know what I knew. So, he cut me out of his life, changed his name, moved away, started over with a new identity, a new story, a new father who conveniently did not exist. He told everyone I was dead. He told you I was dead, but I could not let you go. You were my grandson, my blood, the only family I had left. So, I did something that some might call crazy. I sold everything I owned, my business, my investments, everything, and I bought the house next door to his. I wanted to watch you grow up. I wanted to be near you, even if I could not be part of your life. Your father recognized me immediately. Of course, he could not stop me from buying the house, but he could make sure you never knew who I was. He told you I was dangerous. He built fences and filed lawsuits and did everything he could to keep us apart. But he could not stop me from loving you. He could not stop me from finding ways to reach you. The hole in the fence, the gifts, the conversations. Every moment with you was a gift I did not deserve but treasured beyond measure. I am leaving you everything I have. The house, my savings, everything. It is not much, but it is yours. More importantly, I am leaving you the truth. What you do with it is up to you. I am not asking you to destroy your father. I am just asking you to know who I was, who he is, and to understand that you were loved. Every single day of your life, you were loved by someone who was forbidden to tell you. I watched your first steps through a window. I heard your first words through a fence. I celebrated every achievement from a distance. Unable to embrace you, unable to tell you how proud I was. But I was always there, always watching, always loving. I am proud of the man you have become. I only wish I could have told you sooner. I only wish things had been different. Your grandfather, Walter Hartley. P.S. Do not be too hard on yourself for not seeing it sooner. The best lies are the ones we tell ourselves. And your father had 45 years of practice. I sat in my car for an hour reading the letter over and over. My hands were shaking. My vision was blurred with tears. I did not remember starting to cry. My grandfather, the old man next door, the man my parents had called dangerous, had built walls against, had sued and harassed and tried to drive away for 4 decades. He was my grandfather. And my father had done something so terrible that he had changed his name and built a new identity just to escape it. What could be that bad? What could be worth 45 years of lies? I drove to Walter's house. My house now. I suppose the lawyer had given me the keys along with the letter. I let myself in and climbed the stairs to the attic. The house was quiet. Shadow the cat was gone. Taken to a shelter after Walter went to the hospital. The books were still there. Gathering dust. The photos still hung on the walls, but the life was gone. The warmth had faded. The attic was cramped and dark, filled with boxes and old furniture, and the accumulated debris of a long life. But the box was exactly where he said it would be. Old cardboard, dusty with age, the words, "The Truth," written on the side in faded black marker. I carried it downstairs to the living room, to the armchair where Walter used to sit. I poured myself a glass of whiskey from a bottle I found in his kitchen. And then I opened the box. Inside were newspaper clippings, yellowed and brittle with age. Photographs, legal documents, letters, a whole history of something I had never known existed. The first clipping was from 1979. A local newspaper from a town I had never heard of, maybe 50 miles from where we live now. The headline read, "Hit and Run Leaves Young Mother Dead." The article described how a woman named Sarah Martinez, 28 years old, had been struck by a vehicle while crossing the street near her home. It was late at night around 11:30. She had been walking home from her sister's house just 3 blocks away. The driver had fled the scene. She died at the hospital 3 hours later, never regaining consciousness. She left behind a husband named Roberto and 2 young children. Michael, age 7. Elena, age 4. The driver was never found, but Walter had found him. There were photographs in the box. Photographs of my father's car from that time. A blue Ford Mustang with damage to the front bumper and passenger side. Photographs of the intersection where Sarah Martinez died. Showing skid marks on the pavement. Photographs of repair receipts paid in cash at a body shop 2 towns over dated 2 days after the accident. There was a police report obtained somehow showing that witnesses had described a blue sports car fleeing the scene. The license plate had been obscured by mud. The case went cold within a month. And then there was the letter, a letter from my father to Walter, dated 1979. In his own handwriting. The same handwriting I had seen on birthday cards and permission slips my entire life. Dad, I know you know. I could see it in your eyes when I came home that night. The way you looked at me, the way you looked at the car. I was drunk. I did not see her until it was too late. She came out of nowhere and then there was this horrible sound and I just panicked. I drove away. I know it was wrong. I know I should have stopped, but I was scared, Dad. I was so scared. Please do not tell anyone. Please, I will never drink again. I will never drive drunk again. I will do whatever you want. Just please, please keep this secret. If you love me, you will do this for me. Your son, Richard. The letter was dated 3 weeks after the accident. 3 weeks of my father carrying the secret, watching the news, waiting to be caught, and then confessing to the one person he thought would protect him. Walter had kept the secret for a while. There were more letters in the box. A response from Walter to my father. Dated 1980. Richard, I have tried to live with this. God knows I have tried, but every night I close my eyes and I see that woman. I see her children at the funeral, too young to understand why their mother is not coming home. I see her husband destroyed by grief. You have to turn yourself in. It is the only way to make this right. Those children deserve to know what happened to their mother. They deserve justice. And you deserve a chance at redemption, not a lifetime of running. I love you. I will always love you. But I cannot keep this secret any longer. If you do not go to the police by the end of the month, I will. Your father. My father's response was short, written in a hand that was almost illegible, shaking with anger or fear or both. If you tell anyone, I will disappear. I will change my name. I will move away. You will never see me again. And if I ever have children, you will never meet them. Is that what you want? To lose your only son? To never know your grandchildren? This is your choice, Dad. Not mine, yours. It was not an empty threat. It was a promise. And Walter had made his choice. He had chosen justice over silence. He had told my father he was going to the police. And my father had made good on his word. He vanished, changed his name from Hartley to Webb, moved across the state, married my mother, who either never knew the truth or chose to ignore it. And Walter, left with nothing, had made a different kind of choice. He had found where his son had moved. He had bought the house next door. And he had waited 40 years. He had waited 40 years, watching his grandson grow up from behind a fence, stealing moments through a hole in the wood, loving me the only way he was allowed to. I stayed in that attic all night, reading everything. By morning, I had the full picture. Sarah Martinez, killed on March 15, 1979. 2 children, Michael and Elena, who grew up without a mother. A husband who tried to hold it together for 5 years before the grief and the alcohol consumed him. He died in 1984, the same year I was born, the same year Walter moved next door. A family destroyed by one man's cowardice. A family that never got justice. I had a choice to make. The confrontation happened 3 days later. 3 days of sleepless nights and endless questions. 3 days of looking at my face in the mirror and trying to see my father, trying to see the man who had killed a woman and walked away. I called ahead, told my mother I was coming for dinner. She sounded surprised but pleased. That is wonderful, Marcus. Your father has been asking about you. I bet he has, I thought. I bet he has been asking about me ever since Walter died. I arrived at 7. The same house I had grown up in. The same perfectly manicured lawn. The same American flag by the door. But now it all looked different. Now I saw it for what it was. A stage set. A carefully constructed illusion of respectability built on the foundation of a lie. My father was in his study when I arrived reading a book. He was 72 now, retired from the insurance company where he had worked for 30 years. His hair was white, his face lined with age. He looked like any other grandfather, but he was not. He was a killer who had gotten away with it. Marcus, he looked up from his book. This is a surprise. Your mother said you were coming for dinner. We need to talk first. You and me and Mom right now. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Fear. What about? I threw the box on his desk. The box from Walter's attic. The box labeled the truth. My father's face went pale. Where did you get that? From my grandfather. He left it to me in his will. The silence stretched between us. My father stared at the box like it was a bomb about to explode. He is dead? He finally asked. Yes, he died last week. I was the only one at his funeral. His only family. He was not your family. He was more family to me than you have ever been. My mother appeared in the doorway wearing an apron, a wooden spoon in her hand. What is going on? Dinner is almost ready. Dinner can wait. I said we need to talk about Sarah Martinez. The color drained from both their faces. I do not know what you are talking about, my father said. Really? Then maybe this will refresh your memory. I opened the box, pulled out the newspaper clipping, and threw it on his desk. March 15, 1979. Hit and run. 28-year-old mother of 2. Ring any bells? Marcus, I do not know where you got this, but how about this? I pulled out the photographs of his car, the repair receipts, the letter, his letter in his own handwriting, confessing everything. My father's hands were shaking. That was a long time ago. 45 years. 45 years since you killed her and drove away. It was an accident. You were drunk. You fled the scene. You let her die alone on the street. That is not an accident. That is a crime. I was 23 years old. I was scared. I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is missing an appointment. Killing someone and running away is not a mistake. It is a choice. You do not understand. Then make me understand. Make me understand how you could leave a woman dying in the street. Make me understand how you could cut off your own father for trying to do the right thing. Make me understand how you could raise me with lies. Make me hate the only person who ever truly loved me. My mother started crying. My father sank into his chair, his face gray. I was going to lose everything. He said, if I went to the police, I would have gone to prison. My career would have been over. My life would have been over. Her life was over. Her children's lives were destroyed. Her husband drank himself to death. And you got everything. Career, family, a nice house in the suburbs. I have lived with the guilt every day. Have you? Because from where I stand, it looks like you have lived very comfortably. You have had 45 years of barbecues and holidays and grandchildren who never existed while Sarah Martinez's children grew up without a mother. What do you want me to say? I want you to say you are sorry. I want you to say you will make it right. It is too late to make it right. The statute of limitations. There is no statute of limitations on murder. It was not murder. It was manslaughter. And the limit on that ran out decades ago. Is that what you tell yourself? That it does not count because you got away with it. My father had no answer. I gathered up the contents of the box. I am taking this and I am going to do what Walter should have done 45 years ago. I am going to find Sarah Martinez's children and I am going to tell them what happened to their mother. Marcus, please. My mother's voice was choked with tears. Think about what you are doing. This will destroy us. You destroyed yourselves 45 years ago. They will not believe you. My father said, "It is your word against mine. There is no proof. I have your confession in your own handwriting. I have photographs, receipts, police reports. Walter spent 40 years building a case against you. He just never got the chance to use it." My father's face crumbled. He was going to turn me in. He was going to give you a chance to do the right thing. You chose to run instead. You chose yourself over a dead woman and her children. And then you punished him for it. Lawsuits, harassment, a 10-foot fence. You tried to destroy him and all he did was love me. I was protecting my family. You were protecting yourself. You always have been. I walked to the door. Marcus. My father's voice stopped me. What are you going to tell them? Sarah's children. I turned back. The truth. That their mother was killed by a man who was too much of a coward to face the consequences and that she deserves justice even if it is 45 years late. Finding Sarah Martinez's children was not hard. I am a history teacher. I know how to research. Michael Martinez was 52 now, a mechanic in Toledo. Elena Martinez Cooper was 49, a nurse in Cleveland. Both married, both with children of their own, children who had never known their grandmother. I called Michael first. "Mr. Martinez, my name is Marcus Webb. I have information about your mother's death." There was a long pause. My mother died in 1979. Hit and run. They never found the driver. I know who the driver was. Another pause. Longer this time. "Who are you?" "I am his son and I have evidence." We met in person a week later. Michael and Elena together at a coffee shop in Cleveland. They looked nothing like I expected. Just normal people, middle-aged, tired, carrying decades of unresolved grief. I gave them the box. They read everything. The clippings, the photographs, the confession letter. By the time they finished, Elena was crying silently and Michael's hands were shaking with rage. "All this time," he said. "All this time, he was out there living his life." I know. We were kids. We used to pray every night that they would find him, that there would be justice. I know, and I am sorry. Why are you doing this? He is your father. I thought about Walter, about the hole in the fence, about 40 years of stolen moments and secret kindnesses. Because my grandfather spent his whole life trying to do the right thing, and because you deserve to know. The legal situation was complicated. 45 years had passed. The statute of limitations for vehicular manslaughter had long since expired. My father could not be prosecuted, but that did not mean there could not be consequences. Michael and Elena filed a civil suit. They went to the press. The story of the hit and run of the cover-up of the 45 years of lies made national news. My father's carefully constructed life crumbled. His friends abandoned him. His neighbors, the ones who had supported his war against Walter all those years, were horrified to learn the truth. My mother, finally forced to confront the reality of who she had married, moved out. And me, I inherited Walter's house. I moved in. I started a new chapter of my life in the home of the grandfather. I never knew I had. I found more of his things as I settled in. Photo albums filled with pictures of me taken from a distance, through windows, and across yards. A journal where he wrote about our conversations through the fence, documenting every word, every laugh, every moment of connection. Birthday cards he had never been able to send. Addressed to my grandson, Marcus, stored in a drawer with stamps that were never used. He had loved me every single day for 40 years. He had loved me. And I had never known who he really was. I visit his grave every Sunday now. I tell him about my week, about my students, about the small victories and minor setbacks of an ordinary life. And I tell him that I finally understand why he stayed, why he watched from behind the fence, why he never gave up. Family is complicated. Sometimes the people who should love us the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But sometimes the ones who seem like strangers are the ones who love us most of all. Walter Hartley was not a dangerous man. He was a grandfather who would not give up on his grandson no matter what it cost him. He sacrificed everything, his relationship with his son, his peace of mind, his entire life just to be near me. That is the kind of love I never knew existed. That is the kind of love I want to honor. Michael and Elena come to visit sometimes. We have become something like family, bound together by tragedy and truth. They tell me about their mother, about the person she was before my father took her from them. And I tell them about Walter, about the quiet hero who spent 40 years next door, waiting for a chance to make things right. The fence is gone now. I tore it down the week I moved in. There is nothing separating the two properties anymore. Just open grass leading from one house to the other. My father wrote me a letter last month. He is living in Florida now, alone. His reputation destroyed. He says he is sorry. He says he understands why I did what I did. He says he hopes someday I can forgive him. I have not written back. Maybe I will someday. Maybe forgiveness is possible even for something like this. But right now I am still processing, still grieving, still trying to understand how the man who raised me could have been so monstrous and how the man I was taught to fear could have been so kind. History is not just dates and names. It is people. Ordinary people making choices that ripple forward through time. My father made a choice 45 years ago. He chose to run. He chose to hide. He chose himself over a dying woman and her children. Walter made a different choice. He chose to stay. He chose to watch. He chose to love his grandson from behind a fence, even when he was forbidden to speak. I am making my own choice now. I am choosing truth over lies. I am choosing justice over silence. I am choosing to be the kind of man Walter believed I could be. The fence is gone. The secrets are out. The truth finally is free. Story 3. On my wedding day, my in-laws mocked my brother in front of 800 guests. They said, "That's not a man, that's gutter trash." My fiancé laughed loudly. I stood up and canceled the wedding. My brother looked at me and said, "Brother, I own their entire company." Their faces went pale. The fluorescent lights of County General Hospital flickered at 2 a.m. as Austin Perez hunched over his 10th cup of coffee. Medical charts spread across the nurse's station. 5 years of pre-med, 4 years of medical school, 3 years of residency, all leading to this moment where he'd choose between saving a patient's leg or their life. He chose the leg. Took him 14 hours. But the construction worker would walk his daughter down the aisle someday. "Dr. Perez, you're insane," his attending said, clapping his shoulder. Insane and brilliant. Austin didn't do it for praise. He did it because someone had to care. His younger brother, Samuel, taught him that the kid who'd been born with a twisted spine, who'd endured 7 surgeries before age 12, who'd been written off by half the medical establishment. Austin had watched their mother work 3 jobs to afford treatments, watched his father's heart give out from the stress when Austin was 19. He'd switched from business school to medicine the next semester. Samuel needed someone who gave a damn, and if the system wouldn't provide it, Austin would become the system. Samuel had other plans. While Austin carved through medical textbooks, Samuel carved through financial markets. The kid had a mind like a calculator and patience like a saint. Started with $5,000 from their father's life insurance. Turned it into $50,000 by sophomore year of college. Then $500,000. By the time Austin was chief resident at 32, 28-year-old Samuel was quietly buying distressed assets and turning them profitable. He never talked about his wins, never flaunted his success. He still lived in their childhood neighborhood, still drove their father's old Camry, still wore discount suits. "Why do you live like you're broke?" Austin once asked. Samuel had smiled that quiet, knowing smile that made him seem decades older than he was. "Because I remember what broke actually feels like, and I never want to become the kind of person who forgets." Austin met Christina Becker at a hospital fundraiser. She was everything he thought he wanted. Beautiful, polished from a successful family. Her father, Brent, owned Becker Industrial Solutions, a mid-size manufacturing company that supplied parts to automotive plants across the Midwest. Her mother, Maureen, was on every charity board in the city. The kind of woman whose smile could grace magazine covers and whose judgment could ruin reputations. "You're a doctor," Christina had said. Her eyes lighting up. "That's incredible. My parents will love you." They didn't. 3 months into dating, Austin met the Beckers at their country club. Brent's handshake was crushing and calculating, his eyes measuring Austin's worth in real time. Maureen's greeting was warm until she asked where Austin grew up. The warmth evaporated when he mentioned the South Side. "How humble," Maureen said, the words sounding like an insult wrapped in velvet. But Christina insisted it didn't matter. "They'll warm up to you." She promised. They're just protective. Austin wanted to believe her. He'd been alone for so long. His mother had passed from cancer 2 years ago, and Samuel was his only family. The idea of belonging somewhere, of being part of something larger than hospital shifts and empty apartments was intoxicating. So, he overlooked the small comments. The way Brent always forgot his name, calling him the doctor like a job title instead of a person. The way Morin would talk about their family's lineage, tracing it back to some industrialists from the 1800s, while pointedly never asking about Austin's family. Samuel saw through it immediately. "They're users, Austin," he said over dinner at their favorite hole-in-the-wall Chinese restaurant. "I've seen their type. They want the status of a doctor's son-in-law without actually respecting the person. You haven't even met them. I've done my research." Samuel pushed his glasses up. That meant he'd dug deep. Becker Industrial is in trouble. They lost their 2 biggest contracts last year. Their stock is down 40%. Morin's trust fund is what's keeping them afloat, and that dries up when she turns 65 next year. So, they're going through a rough patch. That doesn't make them bad people. Samuel's jaw tightened. "Just be careful. I know you want a family, but family doesn't come from a wedding certificate. It comes from who stands beside you when everything goes to hell." Austin proposed 6 months later at the same country club where they'd first had dinner with her parents. Christina said yes before he finished the question. The Beckers threw an engagement party that cost more than Austin's annual salary, inviting 300 of their closest friends. Samuel came in his discount suit, bringing a bottle of wine that cost $30. Morin had looked at it like he brought boxed wine, then tucked it behind the bar where no one would see it. "Your brother is sweet," Christina said later. "But maybe for the wedding, we could set him up with a stylist. My parents are inviting some very important people." Austin should have ended it then. But he'd already sent invitations, already put deposits on venues, already imagined the life they'd build. So, he convinced himself it would get better after the wedding. Once the stress of planning was over, once they were actually family, the wedding was scheduled for a Saturday in June at the Riverside Estate, a sprawling venue with manicured gardens and a ballroom that could host 800 guests. Austin had wanted something smaller, more intimate, but Morin insisted. "The Becker name means something in this city," she'd said. "We have obligations." Samuel arrived early on the wedding day, looking uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. Austin was in the groom's suite, adjusting his bow tie for the 50th time when his brother knocked. "You okay?" Samuel asked, nervous, excited, terrified. Austin laughed. "All of it. It's not too late to back out." "Sam, I'm serious." Samuel's expression was grave. "I've been watching them, Austin. The way they treat you, the way they talk about our neighborhood, our family. Yesterday, I heard Morin tell someone, you were rough around the edges, but trainable, like you're a dog. She's just old-fashioned. She's cruel." And Christina laughs when her mother says things like that. "I've heard her." Austin felt his chest tighten. "You're being paranoid. I'm being observant. There's a difference." Samuel gripped his shoulder. "But if this is what you want, I'll stand beside you. Always. Just know you deserve better than people who make you feel like you have to earn basic respect." The ceremony was supposed to start at 4. By 3:30, 800 guests filled the ballroom. Business associates, distant relatives, society fixtures who attended because being seen at a Becker event mattered. Austin stood at the altar, scanning the crowd for familiar faces, and finding none. His med school friends were working shifts. His residency colleagues were scattered across the country. In this sea of strangers wearing designer labels and false smiles, only Samuel felt real. The processional began. Bridesmaids in champagne-colored gowns glided down the aisle, followed by Christina's maid of honor, her college roommate. Then the music swelled for Christina's entrance. She looked stunning in an off-WH gown that probably cost more than Austin's car, her face radiant behind the veil. But then something shifted in the crowd. A commotion near the back. Austin saw Samuel standing frozen as Brent Becker's voice cut through the music. "Move. You're blocking the aisle." Samuel was standing in the side row, not blocking anything. But Brent wanted him to sit further back apparently. Morin joined her husband, her voice pitched to Carrie. "Honestly, some people have no sense of decorum." Samuel tried to sidestep into his seat, but his foot caught on someone's purse strap. He stumbled, catching himself on the chair. A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. The kind of laughter that's really mockery, wearing a polite mask. Brent's voice boomed across the ballroom. "Christ, can't even walk straight. What kind of trashy?" Morin cut him off, but her version was worse. "Darling, please don't make a scene." Then addressing the crowd like she was explaining an embarrassing relative. "That's the groom's brother. You know, They come from difficult circumstances. The laughter grew louder. 800 people watching Samuel. Brilliant. Kind Samuel, who'd overcome more than anyone in this room could imagine being treated like a spectacle. Austin's hands clenched at his sides. But then Christina's voice joined in from the back of the ballroom, her laughter bright and sharp. Oh my God, did you see that? He literally just. She dissolved into giggles, whispering with her bridesmaids. That's not a man. That's gutter trash. The words hit Austin like a physical blow. He looked at Samuel, saw his brother's face, not embarrassed, not angry, but resigned, like he'd expected this all along, like he'd been warning Austin about exactly this moment, and Austin had been too desperate for belonging to listen. The officiant cleared his throat, trying to restore order. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could, Austin walked away from the altar. The crowd fell silent as he strode down the aisle, every eye following him. He reached Samuel first, standing beside his brother in a gesture that needed no words. Then he turned to face the 800 guests, his voice steady and clear. This wedding is cancelled, Morin gasped. Austin, don't be cancelled. He repeated louder. All of it. There will be no ceremony. You can leave. Christina pushed through her bridesmaid's veil. SKW. Are you insane? We can't just watch me. Austin turned to her and he saw her clearly for the first time. Not the woman he'd convinced himself she was, but the woman she'd always been. You laughed when your father humiliated my brother. You laughed. It was just a joke. Austin, God, you're so sensitive about people I love. Yeah, I am. He looked at Brent and Morin. You wanted to marry your daughter to a doctor. Congratulations. You get nothing instead. Brent's face purpled. You ungrateful little. Do you have any idea what this wedding cost? Well, we've invested in you. Invested? Austin laughed bitter. You spent 6 months trying to sand down every rough edge that reminds you I'm not from your world. Well, guess what? I don't want to be from your world. My world has people in it worth respecting. He started to leave Samuel beside him when his brother spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it carried across the silent ballroom. Mr. Becker, Mrs. Becker. Samuel adjusted his glasses. I should probably mention something. You know that investment firm that bought controlling interest in Becker Industrial Solutions 3 months ago? The one that's been keeping your company solvent. Brent's expression shifted from rage to confusion. Titan Capital Holdings. What about them? Samuel's smile was small and dangerous. I am Titan Capital Holdings. I own 68% of your company. As of 3 months ago, I'm your boss. The silence that followed was absolute. Austin stared at his brother, seeing pieces click into place. The late night calls Samuel had been taking. The new office space he'd rented but never explained. The quiet confidence that had seemed to grow over the past year. Morin's face went white. That's not possible. You're nobody. I'm the son of a factory worker who died trying to give his family a better life, Samuel said softly. I'm the kid who spent his childhood in hospitals because his spine grew wrong. I'm the brother of the best man I know who just walked away from the woman he thought he loved because she couldn't extend basic human decency. And yes, I'm also the person who controls whether your family business survives the next board meeting. Brent lunged forward, but Austin stepped between them. The older man froze. Austin had 4 in and 30 pounds on him. And they both knew it. Walk away, Austin said quietly. While you still can. The ballroom erupted. Guests pulling out phones, Morin clutching her husband's arm, Christina screaming about contracts and lawyers, and Austin ruining everything. But Austin heard none of it. He looked at Samuel, his little brother, who'd been protecting him all along, and started to laugh. You bought their company 3 months ago. They were hemorrhaging money after losing those automotive contracts I mentioned. I offered them a lifeline and they took it without doing due diligence on who Titan Capital really was. You didn't tell me. I wanted to see if you'd walk away on your own first. If you'd choose me over them without knowing I had leverage. Samuel's eyes were bright. You did. You chose right. They walked out of the Riverside estate together, leaving 800 guests and one furious Becker family behind. Austin was still in his tuxedo. Samuel in his rented suit, and neither of them had ever felt more free. In the parking lot, Austin stopped. What happens now? Samuel pulled out his phone, scrolling through what looked like spreadsheets and legal documents. Now we go have dinner at Changens like we always do. Tomorrow I have a board meeting at Becker Industrial. And next week, he looked up, his smile sharp. Next week, things get interesting. Austin had one more question. When you bought their company, was it about revenge or business? Both, Samuel admitted. I saw an opportunity. A failing company run by people too arrogant to adapt. I knew I could turn it profitable. But yeah, part of me wanted leverage insurance because I knew people like the Beckers. I knew eventually they'd show you who they really were. I just wanted to make sure when that happened, you'd have options. You've been planning this for months. I've been protecting you like you protected me our whole lives. Samuel's expression softened. You gave up business school to become a doctor because of me. You spent years fighting to give me the best possible life. You think I forgot that? You think I'd let some country club make you feel small? Austin pulled his brother into a hug. I'm sorry I didn't listen. You're not the first person to get blinded by wanting to belong somewhere, but you do belong somewhere with people who know your worth. And tomorrow, the Beckers are going to learn exactly what it costs to underestimate us. They drove to Chang and Samuel's old Camry, still wearing their formal wear, and ordered enough food for 5 people. Mrs. Shang, who'd known them since they were kids, took one look at Austin's tuxedo and Samuel's grin and brought out a bottle of rice wine. Bad wedding? She asked in broken English. Cancelled wedding, Austin corrected. Best decision I ever made. She poured them each a shot. Good. That girl, I see her once when she pick you up. She look at my restaurant like it smell bad. You better without her. They drank to that. And as they ate beef chowing and talked about their next moves, Austin realized Samuel was right. Family wasn't about blood or wedding certificates or country club memberships. It was about who stood beside you when the world tried to break you down. And by that measure, Austin had always been rich beyond measure. His phone buzzed. 17 missed calls from Christina. 43 text messages ranging from apologetic to furious to desperate. He blocked the number and ordered more spring rolls. So Austin said, watching his brother navigate through financial reports on his tablet. Tell me about this board meeting next week. What exactly are we doing to them? Samuel's smile could have cut glass. We're teaching them a lesson about respect and humility and what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I'm listening. Good, because you're going to want to be there for this. Trust me, it's going to be spectacular. The next morning, Austin woke up in his apartment with a headache from rice wine and a clarity that felt almost spiritual. No wedding, no Christina, no more pretending to be someone he wasn't for people who'd never truly accept him. Just him and Samuel and whatever came next. His phone had been blowing up all night. He turned it off around midnight. But now, in the harsh light of day, he knew he'd have to face it eventually. He made coffee first, though. Strong black hospital grade. Then he turned on his phone, 67 missed calls, 123 text messages, 15 voicemails, most from Christina, but several from Morin, 3 from Brent, and oddly 1 from someone named Eddie Combs at the Riverside estate. He started with Eddie's voicemail. Dr. Perez, this is Eddie from Events at Riverside. Look, I just wanted to say what you did yesterday was the gutsiest thing I've seen in 20 years of wedding coordination. Also, the Beckers are refusing to pay their bill. They're saying you canceled, so it's your responsibility. I'm not going to push it because honestly worth it to see Morin Becker's face, but officially we do need someone to settle the account. Give me a call. Austin almost laughed. The wedding had cost north of $200,000. He didn't have that kind of money lying around. Medical residents weren't exactly rolling in wealth. But before he could worry about it, a text came through from Samuel. Already handled the Riverside bill. Paid in full. Consider it a gift. You just saved yourself from a lifetime of misery. Also, board meeting moved to today. 300 p.m. Becker Industrial Solutions headquarters. You should come bring popcorn. Austin texted back. You paid $120 for a wedding that didn't happen. I paid $200K to permanently sever your ties to people who treated you like garbage. Best investment I ever made. See you at 3. Austin showed up to Becker Industrial Solutions at 2:45 p.m. wearing surgical scrubs. He'd come straight from a shift, not bothering to change. The receptionist, a young woman named Cassie Paul, looked at him with confusion. I'm here for the board meeting, Austin said. Are you Dr. Perez? She was clearly trying to place him from the wedding. The cancelled wedding. Yes. Her expression shifted to barely suppressed delight. Oh my God, everyone's been talking about it. Morin came in this morning looking like she'd aged 10 years. Brent locked himself in his office and some guy showed up an hour ago and just took over the conference room like he owned the place. He does own the place. That's my brother. Cassie grinned. This is going to be so good. Conference room is on the 3rd floor. I'll buzz you up. The conference room was glass-walled, overlooking the factory floor below. Through the windows, Austin could see the manufacturing equipment sitting idle. Another bad sign for the company's health. Inside the room, Samuel sat at the head of a massive mahogany table. Looking perfectly comfortable in a suit that Austin now realized probably cost more than the entire wedding. 3 other people were already seated. 2 men in expensive suits who Austin didn't recognize and a woman with steel gray hair who looked like she ate corporate raiders for breakfast. Samuel stood when Austin entered. "Everyone, this is my brother Austin. Austin, this is our legal team. Benjamin McIntosh, corporate law. Hector Schaefer, contracts and acquisitions. And Bonita Schwartz, who specializes in making sure everything we do is ironclad and irrefutable." Benjamin nodded. "Heard about yesterday that took balls or common sense." Bonita added, "I've dealt with the Beckers before. Morin once tried to sue a caterer because the salmon wasn't pink enough. These are not reasonable people." The door burst open. Brent Becker stormed in. Morin right behind him, both looking like they hadn't slept. Christina followed, her eyes red and swollen. Behind them came 2 more people. An older man in his 60s with a kind of tan that spoke of too much golf and not enough work, and a younger guy, maybe 35, wearing a suit that screamed middle management trying too hard. "What the hell is this?" Brent demanded. "You can't just call a board meeting without." "I can actually," Samuel said calmly. "I own 68% of voting shares. I can call a board meeting whenever I want. Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss." "I'm not sitting anywhere until you explain, Mr. Becker." Bonito's voice was pure ice. "You will sit down or you will be escorted out of this building by security and permanently barred from the premises." "Your choice." Prince sat. So did Morin, though she looked like she wanted to flip the table. Christina stood behind them, looking lost. Samuel pulled up a presentation on the large screen at the front of the room. "Let's start with where we are. Becker Industrial Solutions is insolvent. You've been operating at a loss for 18 months. Your 2 largest contracts were lost due to consistent quality control issues and missed deadlines. Your workforce has declined from 230 employees to 147 because you've been doing rolling layoffs rather than addressing the core problems. And your personal spending," he clicked to the next slide, showing a breakdown of expenses, "has continued at an unsustainable rate." Morin's face went red. "You have no right to." "I have every right. I own this company. But let's talk about why I bought it." Another click. 3 months ago, you received an offer from Titan Capital Holdings. We offered you a lifeline in Jet Capital. Take controlling interest, but leave you in operational control. You took the deal without asking questions because you were desperate. You assumed Titan was just another investment firm that would let you keep running things into the ground while we absorb the losses. Who are you really? The older man? Austin assumed he was also a board member, asked quietly. Samuel Perez, son of Thomas and Maria Perez. Thomas died of a heart attack at 46, working 80-hour weeks in a factory not unlike this one to pay for his son's medical bills. Maria died at 52. Cancer because she couldn't afford proper treatment until it was too late. I was that son, the one with medical bills. I spent my childhood watching people like you. He gestured to Brent and Morin. Treat people like my parents as disposable. So when I made my money, I decided to do something about it. This is blackmail. Brent said, I'm trying to save this company despite you. Let me be clear. Becker Industrial Solutions can survive. It has good infrastructure, skilled workers, and relationships with vendors. What it doesn't have is competent leadership. So, here's what's going to happen. Samuel clicked to the next slide. Effective immediately, Brent Becker is removed as CEO. Morin Becker is removed from the board of directors. You'll both retain a token percentage of non-voting shares, enough that you're not completely destitute, but not enough to interfere with actual business operations. You can't do this. Morin shrieked. I can and I am. Benjamin, show them the paperwork. Benjamin slid a thick folder across the table. Everything is legal and binding. You signed over control when you accepted Titan's investment. The terms were very clear. We'll sue. Brent threatened. We'll take you for everything. With what money? Hector asked pleasantly. Your personal assets are mortgaged to the hilt. Your wife's trust fund is nearly depleted and any lawsuit would require discovery, which means every questionable decision you've made in the last 5 years becomes public record, including the embezzlement. The room went quiet. What embezzlement? The younger board member asked nervously. Hector smiled. Turns out Mr. and Mrs. Becker have been quietly siphoning company funds into personal accounts. Nothing massive. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. Hidden expense reports, inflated vendor charges, fake consulting fees. Over 3 years, roughly $400,000. We have all the records. Christina gasped. Dad. Brent's face had gone from red to gray. That's we were going to pay it back. Were you? Samuel's voice was soft. Dangerous. Because according to these bank statements, You were using company money to fund your country club memberships, your daughter's wedding, your wife's shopping habits, and your own stock portfolio losses. You were stealing from a failing company, from the employees who depended on you. So, yes, Mr. Becker, we could prosecute, but we're not going to. Why not? Austin asked, genuinely curious. Because prosecution would hurt the company. It would scare off vendors, tank what's left of our reputation, and put 147 people out of work. The Beckers aren't worth that. Samuel turned back to Brent and Morin. Here's the deal. You sign over all remaining shares. You leave quietly. You never use the Becker name in connection with this company again. And in exchange, we don't prosecute. You get to keep your house, your cars, and whatever is left of Morin's trust fund. You walk away from this with something which is more than you deserve. And if we don't agree, Morin asked, her voice shaking. Then we prosecute. You go to prison for embezzlement and fraud, and you lose everything anyway. The only difference is which ending you prefer. Brent looked at his wife, then at his daughter, then back to Samuel. You did this because of yesterday. Because of what I said about my brother? That was just the trigger. I've been watching you for a year, Mr. Becker. I knew who you were long before yesterday. The wedding was just when you finally showed everyone else. Samuel leaned forward. You wanted to know what kind of man my brother is. He's the kind who walked away from a woman he loved because she laughed when you humiliated me. He's the kind who chose loyalty over comfort, family over status, and you mocked him. You tried to make him feel small so you could feel big. So yes, I'm taking your company, but I'm not doing it for revenge. I'm doing it because I can run it better than you ever did and because the people who work here deserve better than you. The older board member cleared his throat. I'm Ernest Crawford. I've been on this board for 15 years and I've watched the Beckers run this company into the ground. If you're serious about turning things around, Mr. Perez, you have my support. The younger member nodded. Brian Holland. Same. I'm honestly just relieved someone's finally doing something good, Samuel said. Because we start tomorrow. New management structure, new operational protocols, new everything. Ernest. Brian, you'll stay on the board if you want. We're going to need institutional knowledge. He slid a paper across to Brent. Sign here. Walk away. It's your only option. Brent stared at the paper for a long moment. Then, hands shaking, he signed. Morin did the same, tears streaming down her face. One more thing, Samuel said as they stood to leave. Stay away from my brother. If I hear that any of you have contacted him, harassed him, or spread rumors about him, the embezzlement charges come back. Are we clear? They nodded. Christina tried to meet Austin's eyes, but he looked away. There was nothing left to say to her. After they left, the room exhaled collectively. Jesus, Brian muttered. That was intense. That was necessary, Samuel corrected. Ernest. Brian, I want you both to meet with me tomorrow morning. We're going to rebuild this company, but we're doing it right. Fair wages, good conditions, transparent accounting. I want the people who work here to actually want to work here. Ernest smiled. Your father would be proud of you. Samuel's expression softened. I hope so, Austin. Can you stay for a minute? After everyone else filed out, Samuel collapsed into his chair. I've been planning that for 3 months, and I was still terrified it would go wrong. It was perfect, Austin said. Brutal, but perfect. I didn't want to be brutal. I wanted to be fair. They stole from their own company, from their own employees. They deserved worse. He looked at Austin. Are you okay? I know this is a lot. I'm better than okay. I'm free and I'm watching my little brother take down the people who tried to make us feel worthless. It's the best I've felt in months. Samuel grinned. Good, because I have another surprise. I want you to join the board. What? Sam, I don't know anything about integrity. You know about putting people first and you know about fighting for what's right even when it costs you everything. That's exactly what this company needs. He pulled out another folder. I'm creating an employee welfare program. Health coverage, profit sharing, education, assistance. I want you to oversee it. You're a doctor. You understand healthcare better than anyone else in this building. And you're my brother, which means I trust you more than anyone else in this building. Will you do it? Austin looked at the folder, then at Samuel. You really turned their company into something good. I'm going to try with your help. Samuel extended his hand. Partners? Austin shook it. Partners, but I'm keeping my residency. I'm not giving up medicine. I wouldn't ask you to. We'll work around your schedule. The board meets once a month and you can review the health programs whenever you have time. I just want you here helping me make sure we do this right. They left the office together as the sun set over the factory floor. Through the windows, Austin could see the manufacturing equipment still idle. But tomorrow, it would run again. Tomorrow under new management with new priorities. Tomorrow was a fresh start. His phone buzzed. A text from Eddie at Riverside Estate. Heard through the grapevine what happened at the board meeting. You and your brother are legends. Also, if you ever actually want to have a wedding worth celebrating, call me. I'll give you the family discount. Austin showed it to Samuel, who laughed. Getting ahead of yourself, aren't you? You just got out of one engagement. Yeah, but someday when I find someone who treats you like family instead of trash. Someone who earns it. Deal. And when you do, I'll pay for that wedding, too. But this time, it'll actually happen. They drove home in companionable silence. And for the first time in months, Austin felt like himself again. Not the person he'd been trying to become for the Beckers. Not the doctor who worked endless shifts to avoid going home to an empty apartment. Just Austin, brother, son, survivor, and tomorrow, board member of a company that his little brother had saved from destruction. Life was weird sometimes, but looking at Samuel, seeing the quiet pride on his face, Austin thought maybe weird was exactly what they needed. 6 weeks later, Austin stood in the Becker Industrial Solutions parking lot at 6 a.m. watching the morning shift arrive. He'd been working with Samuel and the new management team to implement changes. And today was the big test, the launch of the new employee welfare program. Inside the factory, Samuel had assembled the entire workforce in the main hall. 147 people, many of whom had been with the company for decades, all looking nervous. Under the Beckers, town halls meant layoffs and bad news. Thank you all for coming, Samuel began. I know the last few months have been uncertain. New ownership, new management. You didn't sign up for any of this, so I want to be transparent about where we are and where we're going. He pulled up a slide showing the company's financial status. 6 weeks ago, this company was 3 months from bankruptcy. The previous leadership had been operating at a loss, cutting corners, and burning through capital. You all knew things were bad. What you didn't know was how bad. A murmur ran through the crowd. Austin saw fear on their faces. These were people with mortgages, families, lives built around this job. But here's the good news, Samuel continued. We're turning it around. We've renegotiated contracts with our vendors, brought in new clients, and streamlined operations. We're not out of the woods yet, but we're profitable again. And because we're profitable, I want to invest in the people who made that possible. He nodded to Austin, who stood up. Many of you don't know me. I'm Austin Perez, Samuel's brother. I'm a doctor and I'm also now on the board of directors. We've created something called the Becker Industrial Benefits Program. Terrible name. We're workshopping it, but it's designed to actually take care of you. He clicked to the next slide. Effective immediately. Full health coverage for all employees and their families. No co-pays, no deductibles for preventive care. We've partnered with County General and 3 other hospitals to provide comprehensive coverage. If you're sick, you get treated. Period. The room was silent. People processing what they just heard. Second, profit sharing. This company does well, you do well. Every quarter, 10% of net profits gets distributed among all employees based on seniority and performance. Third, education assistance. You want to get your GED? We'll pay for it. You want to go to trade school? We'll pay for it. You want your kids to go to college? We have scholarship programs. A woman in her 50s raised her hand. Is this real? Because the Beckers used to promise things and then it's real, Samuel said. And it's legally binding. Austin's reviewed every contract personally. We're not making promises we can't keep. This is happening. The silence broke into applause. Then questions rapid fire. How does the health coverage work? When does it start? What about dental vision? Austin fielded them all, using his medical knowledge to explain exactly what was covered and how. By the end of the meeting, people were smiling, some crying. A man named Clyde Murray, who'd been with the company for 23 years, approached Austin afterward. My daughter has diabetes. He said quietly, we've been rationing her insulin because our old insurance was garbage and we couldn't afford full doses. You're saying that's covered now? All of it? Insulin, test strips, doctor visits, everything. Send me her information and I'll personally make sure she's set up with the best endocrinologist in the city. Clyde's eyes welled up. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep making excellent parts. That's all we ask. Word spread fast. Within a week, Becker Industrial Solutions had applications from skilled workers at other companies. People wanted to work somewhere that treated them like humans instead of expenses. Samuel was able to hire back 20 of the people the Beckers had laid off, expanding operations into a secondary product line that had been neglected for years. The factory floor hummed with energy Austin had never seen. Morale was up, quality was up, and production timelines were improving. It turned out that when you treated people well, they performed better. Revolutionary concept, but not everyone was happy about it. 8 weeks after the board meeting, Austin got a call from Benjamin McIntosh. "We have a problem. Brent Becker is talking to competitors, trying to sabotage our vendor relationships. He's telling people that Titan Capital is unstable, that we're going to fold, that they shouldn't sign contracts with us. Can we stop him?" Austin asked. "Legally, not unless he says something defamatory that we can prove. But he's being careful, staying just inside the bounds of protected speech. He's also been posting on business forums under fake names, spreading rumors." Samuel on speakerphone swore quietly. "I should have seen this coming. He's bitter and he has nothing to lose. What's our play? We outperform him." Austin said, "We let our results speak for themselves. Any vendor who listens to Brent's nonsense over our actual track record isn't someone we want to work with anyway." "That's the high road," Samuel said. "I'm not sure I want to take the high road anymore." "Then take the smart road." Bonita interjected. She joined the call. "Brent is making himself look desperate. Every time he badmouths us and we keep succeeding, he looks worse. Let him dig his own grave." They followed Bonito's advice and she was right within a month. Brent's attempts at sabotage had backfired spectacularly. Vendors saw his desperation and started avoiding him. His reputation in the business community tanked. Meanwhile, Becker Industrial Solutions landed a major contract with a national automotive manufacturer, a deal that guaranteed stability for the next 3 years. The local business journal ran a story from crisis to comeback, how new leadership saved Becker Industrial. The article praised Samuel's turnaround strategy and highlighted the employee welfare program. It didn't mention the Beckers by name, but the omission was damning. They'd been erased from their own company's success story. Morin took it the hardest. She'd built her identity around being a Becker, around the social status that name carried. Now, that name meant nothing, and she had no idea who she was without it. She started calling Austin, leaving rambling voicemails that ranged from apologetic to accusatory. "Please just talk to me." One message said, "We made mistakes, but we're family, or we were supposed to be. Don't you believe in forgiveness?" Austin deleted them without responding. Samuel had been right. Forgiveness didn't mean allowing toxic people back into your life. It meant letting go of anger, not letting them hurt you again. But Christina was different. 3 months after the canceled wedding, she showed up at the hospital at 2 a.m. looking exhausted and desperate. "I need to talk to you," she said when Austin emerged from a trauma surgery. "I'm working and we don't have anything to say to each other. Please, just 5 minutes." Her eyes were red-rimmed. "I know I don't deserve it, but please." Against his better judgment, Austin led her to the doctor's lounge. 5 minutes. "I'm sorry," she began. "I know that's not enough, but I am. What I said at the wedding, laughing when my father I was wrong. I've been wrong about a lot of things. You humiliated my brother, the person I care about most in the world, and you laughed. I know. I was trying to fit in with my parents' expectations and I lost myself. I lost us." She looked at him pleadingly. "I've been in therapy working on things, trying to understand why I did what I did. And I realize now that I was so focused on pleasing my parents that I never asked what I actually wanted. And what do you want, Christina? I want to make this right. I want another chance. I want no." Austin's voice was firm but not angry. "You don't want me. You want the idea of me. You want to fix your guilt to prove you're a better person than you were. But that's not my job. I'm not your redemption arc. Austin, I watched you become someone cruel because it was easier than standing up to your parents. And maybe you're working on that now, and that's good. But it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change that when it mattered, you chose them over basic human decency." Tears streamed down her face. "I made a mistake. You made a choice. And I made mine. I chose my brother, my integrity, my self-respect, and I'd make that choice again every single time." He stood up. "I hope you figure yourself out, Christina. I hope therapy helps, but I'm not going to be part of that journey. Find someone else to prove you've changed. I'm done." He walked away. And for the first time since the wedding, he didn't look back. 6 months after the canceled wedding, Becker Industrial Solutions was thriving. The factory was running at full capacity. They'd hired 50 new employees and profits were up 37%. Samuel had been featured in Forbes as one of 30 under 30 to watch in the manufacturing sector. Austin's employee wellness program had become a model that other companies were trying to replicate. They celebrated at Chang's. Naturally, Mrs. Chang brought out her special dumplings, the one she only made for family, and refused to let them pay. "You boys make me proud," she said, patting both their heads like they were still kids. "Your mama and papa. They watch from heaven. They see what you do. They proud, too." Austin raised his beer. "To Dad, who taught us that work means something. And to Mom, who taught us that people mean everything. To family," Samuel added. "The one we're born with and the one we choose." They drank to that. And as they ate dumplings and planned the next phase of the company's growth, Austin's phone buzzed. An unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Dr. Perez, this is Ernest Crawford from the board. I'm calling with some news you want to hear. Brent Becker just filed for bankruptcy. His personal bankruptcy, not business. Apparently, he's been gambling, trying to make back what he lost. Didn't work out. He's lost everything. In the house, the cars, all of it." Austin felt a complex mix of emotions. Not satisfaction exactly. Not quite sadness either, just a kind of resigned acknowledgement that consequences were real. "What about Maureen and Christina?" he asked. Maureen's moved in with her sister in Connecticut. Christina is apparently working retail somewhere, living in a studio apartment. She's cut ties with both parents from what I hear, trying to start over. After he hung up, Samuel asked, "Bad news?" "Depends on your perspective. The Beckers lost everything." "For real this time?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. "You feel bad about it?" "A little, maybe. I don't know." Austin pushed his beer around the table. "They made their choices. We made ours, but it's still sad, you know, to watch people destroy themselves. They had every opportunity to do better. We gave them an out. They could have walked away with something, but Brent kept gambling, kept making bad decisions. At some point, that's on him." "Yeah." Austin looked at his brother. "You know what though? I'm glad we didn't destroy them. I'm glad we just removed them from power and let them destroy themselves. Because if we crushed them directly, I'd feel worse. This way, they had agency. They had choices. They made bad ones. That's because you're a better person than they deserve," Samuel said. "But I'm glad too. Revenge is supposed to feel good. But I think this feels better knowing we built something good instead of just tearing something down." "Speaking of building something," Austin said, pulling out a folder he'd been carrying. "I have an idea. What if we expand the employee wellness program, not just here, but partner with other companies, consult with them on building similar programs? We could create a whole new standard for how manufacturing treats workers." Samuel's eyes lit up. "A consulting division. We'd be helping more people, spreading the model, and making money while we do it. Win-win. I love it. Let's build a proposal for the board next month." They spent the rest of the night sketching out plans, dreaming bigger. And when Austin finally got home at midnight, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pure, uncomplicated hope. 1 year after the canceled wedding, Austin was asked to give a talk at a medical conference about integrating health care into workplace wellness programs. He almost said no, public speaking wasn't his thing, but Samuel convinced him. "You've helped transform an entire company. People need to hear how you did it. Besides, you're great at explaining complex things. You're a teacher at heart." So Austin found himself on a stage in Chicago looking out at 300 healthcare administrators and HR professionals, feeling his heart pound in his chest. He started with the story of the canceled wedding. "A year ago, I was standing at an altar about to marry someone I thought I loved. And my future in-laws humiliated my brother in front of 800 people. Called him trash, laughed at him, and my fiancée joined in." He paused. "I canceled the wedding. Best decision I ever made." He had their attention now. "But this isn't a story about a wedding. It's a story about values. See, my brother, who'd been mocked and dismissed, turned out to own my in-laws' company. And when he took control, he didn't destroy it. He saved it by implementing programs that valued employees as humans instead of expenses. And it worked. The company went from near bankruptcy to record profits in under a year." He clicked to his first slide, showing the data. Healthcare costs down, productivity up, employee retention through the roof, quality control metrics better than ever. "Here's what we learned. Taking care of people isn't charity. It's good business. When workers don't have to choose between seeing a doctor and paying rent, they perform better. When they know their families are protected, they're more loyal, more engaged, more innovative. It's not complicated. Treat people well and they'll deliver excellence." The talk went viral. Within a week, Austin had fielded calls from 50 companies wanting to know more. Samuel's consulting division launched with more business than they could handle. They had to hire a full team just to manage the demand. And through it all, Austin kept working as a doctor. He couldn't give it up. Medicine was part of who he was. But now he had balance. Purpose in both worlds. Helping individual patients and helping entire workforces. Samuel teased him about becoming a celebrity. You're like the Dr. Oz of workplace wellness, except actually helpful. Please never compare me to Dr. Oz again. They were in Samuel's office, a real office now, not the cramped space he'd started in reviewing expansion plans. Becker Industrial Solutions was branching into new markets, acquiring 2 more struggling manufacturing companies to turn around. The model was proven. The formula worked. You ever think about Dad? Austin asked suddenly about what he'd think of all this. Samuel set down his pen. Every day, I think he'd be amazed. Proud definitely. Maybe a little overwhelmed by how big it's gotten. But mostly, I think he'd be happy that we're doing it right, that we're not just making money, we're making a difference. And Mom, she'd cry, happy tears. Then she'd make us her Ras Khan polo and tell us not to get big heads. Samuel smiled. They gave us everything they had. The least we can do is make sure other families don't have to sacrifice like they did. Austin's phone rang. The hospital. Perez here. Dr. Perez. We have a patient in the ER construction accident. Multiple injuries. Patient specifically asked for you. Says you saved his leg 5 years ago. Wants you to save his life now. Austin was already grabbing his keys. On my way. He paused at the door, looking back at Samuel. Dinner tomorrow, Chang's always. Austin rushed to the hospital. His mind already shifting into doctor mode. The business side of his life faded and the medical side emerged because this was who he was. Someone who saved lives, who fought for people, who never gave up, just like his brother, just like his parents had taught them. And as he scrubbed in for surgery, Austin realized something. A year ago, he thought he needed the Becker's approval to be complete, to be worth something. But he'd always been worth something. He'd always been enough. Canceling that wedding had been the beginning, not the end. And everything that came after the company turned around, the wellness programs, the consulting business, all of it was just proof that sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away from people who don't see your value. Because somewhere out there, someone will. And when they do, you'll be ready for them. 18 months after the canceled wedding, Austin met someone. Her name was Tanya House, and she was a social worker at County General. He'd seen her around for months. She was the one who fought with insurance companies to get patients the care they needed, who found housing for homeless patients being discharged, who somehow made miracles happen with no resources and endless determination. They met officially when they both arrived at 6 a.m. to check on the same patient, a teenager who'd been in a car accident and had no family. Austin was handling the medical side. Tanya was handling everything else. You're Dr. Perez, she said, shaking his hand. I've heard about you, the surgeon who operates on hope and stubbornness. You're the social worker who makes the impossible happen, he replied. We should collaborate more often. They did. And somewhere between patient consultations and rush cafeteria coffees, Austin realized he was looking forward to seeing her every day. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she was good, genuinely thoroughly good in a way that didn't require fanfare or recognition. When he finally asked her out 3 months later, she laughed. I was wondering when you get around to it. I've been dropping hints for weeks. I'm a little gun-shy after my last relationship imploded spectacularly. I heard about that. Everyone has. You're kind of a legend around here. The guy who canceled his wedding because his fiancée was terrible to his brother. Most romantic thing I've ever heard. That's romantic. Hell yes. You chose love and loyalty over social pressure and convenience. You walked away from someone who didn't deserve you. That's not just romantic, it's heroic. Their first date was at Chang's. Mrs. Chang took one look at Tanya and beamed. You bring nice girl. Smart girl, good girl. She turned to Tanya. You keep him. He good man. Heart of gold. I can tell. Tanya said warmly. Samuel showed up halfway through dinner. Austin suspected Mrs. Chang had called him. He slid into the booth, extending his hand to Tanya. I'm the brother, the one from the wedding story. I've heard so much about you. Austin talks about you constantly. Good things, I hope. The best things. He says you're the smartest person he knows and the only one he completely trusts. Samuel glanced at Austin. Something warm passing between them. He's not wrong, but I'm also incredibly annoying and I'm going to third wheel this date to make sure you're good enough for him. Samuel. Austin started. It's okay. Tanya interrupted laughing. I'd be suspicious if you didn't vet me. My sister did the same thing when I started dating my ex. They spent 2 hours talking about work, family, dreams, failures. Tanya shared that she'd grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes until she aged out at 18. That's why she became a social worker, to be the advocate she'd never had. I get it, Samuel said quietly. The system failed you, so you became the system you needed. Austin did the same thing. The medical establishment failed our family. So, he became the doctor who doesn't fail people. And you? Tanya asked. I became someone who makes sure workers aren't treated like my father was. We all have our origin stories. The question is what we do with them. By the end of the night, Samuel gave Austin a subtle thumbs up. Tanya had passed the test. Over the next 6 months, Austin and Tanya built something real, something based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. When he introduced her to the Becker Industrial team, she fit in immediately, offering suggestions for expanding the wellness program to include mental health services and child care assistance. She's perfect for you, Samuel said after one board meeting where Tanya had presented her ideas. She gets it. She gets us. I know it's terrifying. Why terrifying? Because I screwed up so badly last time. What if I'm wrong again? Samuel shook his head. You weren't wrong about Christina. You saw what you wanted to see because you were lonely, but you're not lonely anymore. You're happy and you're choosing Tanya with clear eyes, not desperate ones. That's the difference. Austin proposed at Chang's naturally. Mrs. Chang cried. Samuel recorded the whole thing on his phone, grinning like an idiot. Tanya said yes before Austin finished asking, pulling him into a kiss that tasted like hot and sour soup and happiness. One condition, she said. Your brother has to be your best man. Obviously, who else would I ask? And we're not inviting 800 people. We're inviting about 30. The people who actually matter. Perfect. Then yes. 1,000 times. Yes. They got married 6 months later at a small ceremony at a botanical garden. 30 guests, doctors and nurses from the hospital, workers from the factory, Mrs. Chang and her family, Samuel and his girlfriend Eva Carey, who he'd been secretly dating for months and finally admitted to, and Tanya's foster sister, who'd flown in from Seattle. Ernest Crawford, who'd become a mentor to both Austin and Samuel, officiated. His speech was short and perfect. Marriage is about choosing someone every day, not just on the wedding day, but every morning after. It's about standing beside them when the world tries to push you apart. Austin and Tanya already know this. They've both fought too hard and survived too much to take love for granted. So, this isn't just a wedding. It's a promise to keep choosing each other, to keep fighting for each other, to keep building something beautiful together. When Austin kissed his bride, Samuel Wolf whistled and the whole garden erupted in laughter and applause. At the reception, Austin found a quiet moment with his brother. Thank you, Austin said. For everything, for saving the company, for having my back, for not letting me marry the wrong person. You would have figured it out eventually, Samuel replied. You're too good to stay with someone who diminishes you, but I'm glad I could speed up the timeline. Still, I owe you. You don't owe me anything. You've been saving my life since we were kids. This is just me returning the favor. They stood there, two brothers who'd survived poverty and loss, and people who tried to make them feel small and watched the people they loved celebrate love itself. Dad would have loved this. Austin said he would have cried through the whole ceremony. Mom, too, they're here though. I feel them. Me, too. The reception went late into the night. No country club pretension. No judgmental stares. No one keeping score of who is important enough to attend. Just people who genuinely cared, celebrating two people who'd found each other against all odds. And when Austin and Tanya left for their honeymoon a week in Costa Rica, nothing fancy, just beaches and quiet, Samuel handed them an envelope. Don't open until you land. On the plane, they opened it together. Inside was a deed to a house, a beautiful craftsman in a good neighborhood with a yard and enough space for the family they'd talked about starting someday. He bought us a house, Tanya whispered, stunned. Austin wasn't surprised. That was Samuel. Quiet, thoughtful, always 10 steps ahead. The note inside said simply, every family needs a home. Love, Sam. Austin called him as soon as they landed. You bought us a house. I bought you a wedding gift. There's a difference. Samuel, you gave up everything for me once. Let me do this for you, please. Austin's throat tightened. Thank you for everything. Just be happy, Austin. That's all the thanks I need. 2 years after the canceled wedding, Austin and Tanya's house was full of life. They'd adopted a dog, a 3-legged rescue named Lucy, who'd been abandoned at a shelter. They were talking about kids, about the future, about all the possibilities that lay ahead. Becker Industrial Solutions had grown into a regional powerhouse, a model for ethical manufacturing. Samuel had acquired 4 more companies, implementing the same transformation at each one. The consulting business had expanded internationally. They'd literally changed industry standards. And through it all, Austin kept being a doctor, kept saving lives, kept fighting for patients who needed someone in their corner. One evening, Austin came home from a particularly brutal shift to find Tanya in the kitchen cooking dinner and humming along to music. Lucy was curled up on the couch. The house smelled like garlic and tomatoes and home. "Bad day?" Tanya asked, reading his expression. "Lost a patient. 8-year-old leukemia. We tried everything." She pulled him into a hug, letting him feel it. "I'm sorry." They stood there for a while. Lucy eventually padding over to lean against Austin's legs. This was what healing looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic victories, but quiet moments with people who loved you through the hard parts. Samuel called. Tanya said eventually he wants us to come to the office tomorrow. Says he has news. The next day they gathered in Samuel's office. Austin, Tanya, Eva, and the core leadership team. Samuel looked nervous, which was unusual. So he began, "I've been thinking about expansion. We've proven the model works. We've changed how manufacturing treats workers, but I want to go bigger." He pulled up a presentation. "I want to create a foundation. The Thomas and Maria Perez Foundation for Worker Welfare. We'll fund research into workplace health, provide grants to companies wanting to implement better programs, and offer direct support to workers in crisis. Healthcare, education, emergency funds, all of it." Austin felt his eyes burn. "You're naming it after Mom and Dad. They started this. Their sacrifice, their struggle. It's why we do what we do. I want their names attached to something that helps people like them. People who work themselves to death trying to provide for their families." "How much are you putting in?" Austin asked. $20 million to start. But I want you to run it. You understand healthcare. You understand workers. You understand the mission. Will you do it?" Austin looked at Tanya, who was crying. Then at Samuel, his little brother who'd grown into the most remarkable person Austin knew. "On one condition, you let me put in $5 million. Half the money I've saved, invested, built up over the years. This is our legacy. Both of us equal partners." Samuel's eyes widened. "Austin, I'm serious. We do this together or not at all." Samuel walked around the desk and pulled Austin into a fierce hug. "Together, then always together." The Thomas and Maria Perez Foundation launched 3 months later with a gala that was actually meaningful, not socialites pretending to care, but actual workers, actual families whose lives had been changed by the programs they'd implemented. Clyde Murray spoke about how his daughter's diabetes care had saved her life. A woman named Laura Johnson talked about how the education assistance had let her get her nursing degree. A man named Pedro Graham shared how the emergency fund had kept his family housed when he'd been injured on the job. "These aren't just programs," Pedro said, his voice breaking. "This is proof that someone gives a damn about people like us, that we matter, that our lives have value." When Austin took the stage to speak, he looked out at a room full of faces. People who'd been invisible to the Beckers, to people like the Beckers, to a system that treated workers as expendable. 2 years ago, I was supposed to get married," he began. "And my soon-to-be in-laws humiliated my brother in front of 800 people. They called him trash. They treated us like we were less than human because we came from nothing. And I walked away from that wedding, from that family, from that life." He paused. "Best decision I ever made because it led me here to this work, to these people, to understanding that wealth isn't measured in country club memberships or social status. It's measured in the lives you touch, the people you help, the changes you make. My parents died too young, broken by a system that didn't value them. But they taught us, my brother and me, that every person has dignity. Every person deserves respect. Every person matters. And this foundation is how we honor that lesson by making sure other families don't have to sacrifice what ours did." The applause was thunderous. And as Austin left the stage, Samuel caught his arm. "They'd be so proud of us." Samuel said, "I know. I feel them every day." And he did. In every decision, every program, every life changed for the better. Austin felt his parents' influence. Their sacrifice hadn't been in vain. Their struggle had meaning. Their legacy lived on in ways they never could have imagined. That night at home with Tanya and Lucy, Austin's phone buzzed, an unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Dr. Perez," a woman's voice, hesitant. "This is Christina. Christina Becker, I know I probably shouldn't call, but I wanted you to know I saw your speech tonight online and I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. You deserve so much better than how my family treated you, than how I treated you. And I'm so happy you found it." Austin was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for saying that. I hope you're doing well. I am. I'm working as a teacher now. Elementary school. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And I'm in therapy, actually working on myself instead of just talking about it. I'll never forgive myself for what I did, but I'm trying to be better. That's all anyone can do. Be better than they were yesterday. Your brother, is he happy? Incredibly. He's with someone who sees his worth. They're building a life together. Good. That's good. She paused. I won't bother you again. I just wanted you to know that what you're doing, the foundation, all of it, it matters. You're changing lives. And I'm grateful I got to witness even a small part of your journey. Even if I was on the wrong side of it. After she hung up, Tanya asked, "You okay?" Yeah, that was closure. Real closure. She's not the villain anymore. Just someone who made bad choices and is trying to do better. I can let that be enough. That's growth. That's us. We choose growth over bitterness. Progress over revenge. Love over hate. Very wise, Dr. Perez. I learned from the best. They curled up on the couch together, Lucy between them, and watched mindless TV. And in that simple, perfect moment, Austin realized something profound. He'd won. Not by destroying the beggars, not by crushing his enemies, but by building something so beautiful, so meaningful that their small-minded cruelty became irrelevant. By choosing love and purpose over anger and revenge, that was the victory. Not their downfall, but his rise. Not their punishment, but his peace. And as he drifted off to sleep, Tanya's head on his shoulder. Samuel's text lighting up his phone. Foundation raised $2M tonight, we're going to change so many lives. Austin smiled. This was what winning looked like. This was what happiness felt like. This was home.